Good morning, everyone. Call on Government Order of the Day number 1.
Building and Construction Small Standalone Dwellings Amendment Bill, third reading.
The Honourable Son
Mr. Speaker, I present a legislative statement on the Building and Construction Small Standalone Dwellings Amendment Bill.
That legislative statement is published on the authority of the House and can be found on the Parliament website.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the Building and Construction Small Standalone Dwellings Amendment Bill be now read a third time. It takes too long and it is too expensive to build in New Zealand. That is why the Coalition Government, through the National New Zealand First Coalition Agreement, committed to making it faster and more affordable to build granny flats. Removing barriers to building small, simple houses is a common sense change that will be important and an important step in helping address New Zealand's housing crisis. This bill will help to increase the supply of affordable housing options for both young and old New Zealanders, as well as people with disabilities and those in rural sector, particularly rural workers. Before getting into the detail of the bill itself, it's worth noting that this bill is widely supported by the public and across the House. This speaks to the design of the bill and what it seeks to achieve. Firstly, accelerating housing growth by right-sizing the regulatory approach for simple, lower-risk building work. If you take a look at the bill will permit non-consented small standalone dwellings, commonly referred to as granny flats, to be built without a building consent, subject to certain conditions. That is, that the building must be simple in its design and meet the building code. Building work must be carried out or supervised by authorised personnel, and councils must be notified prior to and on the completion of building work. The bill also maintains appropriate safeguards to provide assurance to homeowners, councils, insurers and lenders that eligible homes will still meet the minimum code requirements and still will be healthy, safe and durable. These safeguards include existing consumer protection mechanisms in the Building Act 2004, including pre-contract disclosures and a 12-month defect-free period. To ensure consent-exempt granny flats are simple, lower-risk buildings, the bill provides that they must be new, standalone, single-storey dwellings of 70 square metres or less. The bill also provides that granny flats must be built in accordance with a set design specification set out in Schedule 1A. For example, the dwelling must be constructed with lightweight materials for the roof. The bill also introduces a power to add, remove or amend some of these simple design requirements by order and council. The ability to change these simple design requirements will ensure that the building design conditions in Schedule 1A may be reviewed and updated in ways that will continue to meet the building code. It's important that those doing the work have the competency to do so and can be held to account if things go wrong. As such, building work must be carried out by supervised, authorised professionals. These professionals are required to produce a record of the work that they are responsible for so that they have a lasting record of the work that was completed, who completed it and when. This information will be valuable for future owners, insurers and lenders who may want to know if the building does in fact meet minimum building code requirements. To ensure owners and councils can be fully informed of the proposed building work, the bill also provides that owners must notify the relevant council of their intent to build a granny flat by applying for a Project Information Memorandum, also known as a PIM. The bill requires that councils issue additional information alongside the PIM to further inform owners and support their decision making. This will include information on any natural hazards that may be present on the land and whether the council has a view to make changes to the proposed design or a building consent is required to manage the risk presented by the building work in connection with the natural hazard. It is important to note that this is for information purposes only. Homeowners will have the freedom to determine how they respond, and it will be up to the owners to determine how they may wish to utilise this information to build a compliant granny flat. The bill also offers a much simpler process in regards to building a code compliant granny flat compared to the normal building consent process. Firstly, a homeowner will engage qualified tradespeople to carry out the building work, along with lining up their insurance and lending requirements, if applicable. A homeowner will then apply for a PIM and receive that within 10 working days. A homeowner will then use that information to provide them to complete their design plans and ensure that all the exemptions conditions are met, along with applying for any relevant authorisations to connect to a council network if not received at the point of the PIM. And at that point, building work will commence. As the work is completed, records of this work will be produced and provided to the homeowner or to a homeowner and a council for restricted building work. And then, when a owner has received all relevant records from tradespeople, they have 20 working days to provide these to the council and to pay any development contributions owing. This is a common sense, straightforward approach to building a granny flat. Building owners will then be able to choose if they wish to follow this process or if they wish to go down the normal building consent process, which can see homes taking several months to receive a Code of Compliance certificate. This bill will make it easier to build, it will make it more simple, and lower risk homes that many New Zealanders will be able to live in will benefit from. It will also help unlock productivity, Mr. Speaker, in the construction sector, which will help to increase supply of affordable housing options for Kiwis. On that basis, Mr. Speaker, I commend this bill to the House.
Mr. Speaker.
Arana Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to take a final call on this bill, which has been an example of cross-partisan working support through a select committee ably chaired by Andy Foster and a minister enthusiastically engaging not only with the sector who builds these things, the people on the ground who know and want to be able to build granny flats and to stimulate the work that they need and to improve productivity in their industry, but also engaging with many of the submissions that have come through the select committee process. This is a sensible change that is designed to stimulate more building work at a time when the construction sector desperately needs it, and to improve people's access to simple buildings that will be built in connection with people's single homes on parcels of land which can accommodate them. It creates a new system for councils to be able to notify people of any risks associated with that, and that remains something that the Labour Party will continue to watch and determine whether that works, because as I have noted along the way in this process, there are systems in this which have been designed quickly. We do not know the full impact of them, and so it is on all of us who have been supportive of this legislation to make sure that it works for the people who will be affected within their communities, and those systems have to be robust, and so we'll make sure that this is a building system addition which contributes to New Zealand's building system overall being affordable, delivering houses that are in the right place and being safe. But Mr. Speaker, I wanted to highlight for the House at this point, the third reading, just how important this is for New Zealand, because at a time when we are seeing more government policy that makes it harder for people to afford their rents and harder for them to afford their housing costs, that there should be some element of government action on this. This isn't where Labour would have started. This is a change on the supply side which will make a small movement of the dial to make housing more affordable at a time when rents continue to rise and when people in New Zealand are still facing a housing stock which has significant challenges of dampness, of thermal inefficiency, and particularly for those more vulnerable communities, real issues in terms of affordability, things like poor sanitation, which the ministry in charge of the building system and acting as a steward for the housing system as a whole have pointed out to successive governments that is not something we expect in New Zealand. It is not a standard that we should set ourselves for our homes, and so any small thing that will enable the building of new structures that are of a higher standard and that can get people into better quality housing at an affordable rate and make some kind of measure on the supply side to address the real needs in our communities, that is a good thing. But this is not the silver bullet. I was reflecting on when I was sitting in the committee room alongside my colleagues who have all brought a huge amount of enthusiasm to making a change here that will be lasting and that will be robust, and listening to the views of others in the community about how to make this something which New Zealanders can buy into. And I was listening to the submissions of Māori architects, and there was one who came along with his 2 young daughters, and they introduced themselves to the committee. I believe the one who was speaking was about 11 years old, and she spoke of her home in Te Urewera and about the building standards that she hoped for her community, that we could be using more local knowledge and that we could be providing for a community there who for generations have lived with underperforming housing stock, but reclaiming some of the knowledge that her father was reviving through his work as an architect. It highlighted for me the missed opportunity that we have there, and it connected with me because my father was born in the Te Urewera in the early 1930s, at a time when that area of the country was vastly cut off from the rest of us. It still is, says the Honourable Peeni Henare. And he moved, he was moved as a baby over to the shores of the Ohiwa Harbour, where he grew up in a raupō whare. That raupō whare had a dirt floor, it had a thatched roof made of reeds that were replaced each season to keep the rain out, but he recalls that being a warm whare where he really enjoyed his life with his grandparents, who were part of the Ringatu Church and were there safeguarding an area which was important to the life and the death of Te Kōti Arikirangi Te Turuki. And reflecting on those building practices that this little girl, 11 years old, had come along to speak to the committee about, and that we could not include in this bill, we could not include it in any legislation which is moving through the House on Building Systems, made me think about the lost opportunity that we have here when we restrict ourselves to a narrow view of what is possible in Aotearoa for a future that this little girl was advocating for. There is something to be learned from these young people who are hoping for more from a building system and a housing system which houses the people who need it most, when we cannot make any shift of the dial for her and her aspirations, and looking back to those practices which worked so well for my father in her own rohe. When you think about the policies of successive governments from then, when he was born, until now, it tells a picture of housing inequality in New Zealand, which we are missing too. That successive governments from the 1940s, that were Labour governments, absolutely changed the picture for housing ownership. Rates rose over those 2 decades that were post-war years to increase housing ownership from about half to about 2/3. That was because people were able to build their own homes cheaply, and it was because they were able to be supported by a state program backed to build state houses. State ownership increased and housing quality increased over those years because those 2 things went hand in hand. The big difference in housing policy arose in the 1990s when a national government implemented a housing policy that involved slashing all controls around people's access and increasing rents. Some people saw their rents of state houses go up 300% in 6 months. The difference there is that successive Labour and national governments have believed that it is the role of the state to not only increase supply of housing, like this bill does, but to ensure that demand for housing is also supported. And that is, I think, the point here, that we are missing a trick if we think that these measures will make the difference that we need to radically increase not only home ownership, but the quality of housing in New Zealand. And so for this is something that we can all support. And this is something that we all need to keep working on to make sure that sort of crust, as I like to call it, Cameron Luxon, the crust of regulations that has grown up over those decades that I am talking about, has is not holding back anyone to build cheaply and affordably, which is something we believe in too. But to also make sure that we have the policies of the crust that has grown up that we need to be brushing away. But there is also a role for us in making sure that those interventions that we can make to make sure that home ownership is increasing continues, because it has been successive governments of both stripes. Keith Holyoake's government stands out to me in the 1960s as a government that prioritised home ownership. He was the Prime Minister of home ownership. And we need to see that commitment being bipartisan and being widely agreed as important to New Zealand, because it increases our productivity overall, it increases our economic resilience, it increases resilience at the household and family level. It gives people something to be proud of and to hope for, and a connection into their communities which is unparalleled. It is a meaningful government policy that we should not walk away from when times are like this, when the economy is tough for people and we need to make an intervention on both sides. Mr. Speaker, I'm looking forward to watching how this bill it impacts on New Zealand. It's predicted that 13,000 of these small dwellings might be built because of this intervention. That's a good thing. Where they are in the country makes a big difference, and how they are received by their communities makes a big difference, because people need to buy into this, and it will change the way some neighbourhoods look and feel, and we need to make sure that people can support a process, and councils that also work within the process are supported to be able to do that. Have the funding and financing adequate to be able to administer this system. These are also became larger during the process of our consideration of the bill, up to 70 square metres. That is also something which we will watch closely, because the intention here is I think in most Kiwis' minds that they will be small, but these will be larger buildings, and so we need to make sure that the system is working for everyone. But at this final stage, we're proud to support this bill, and we look forward to it making some small difference.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. Celia Wade-Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on behalf of the Green Party at this third reading of the Building and Construction Amendment Bill. And as we reach this final stage of the bill's journey, it's time to reflect on some of the things we've achieved, what we're still not sure about, and what we need to address in the future. And we support particularly enabling tangata whenua to build on their own land. We support making it easier for multi-generational whānau to house their kaumātua, their rangatahi, or other relatives. And we support giving people who do have land to add housing capacity more simply. I have to say that 70 metres is a lot larger than where I live, but it's an interesting change to the size. We do believe that housing is a human right, and we urgently need more affordable, healthy, secure homes in Aotearoa. But this bill is a very small tool in what needs to be a much larger toolbox. As it becomes law, we must be honest about both its potential and its limitations. I want to say a little bit about the council role. It's a very major shift introducing how councils operate in relation to building oversight. Instead of a consent process, councils will now provide the project information memoranda, the PIMs, and it reduces their liability in some ways, and it quite dramatically changes their role. Councils will still need to manage the infrastructure impacts, the stormwater, the wastewater, the roading, but with less information and less oversight. What happens if there's a surge of these dwellings in just one area? What happens if landlords use them in different ways than we had been expecting? At the second reading, some members spoke about preventing councils from wriggling out or possibly wiggling out of the bill's intent. But we can't hold councils responsible on one hand and remove their oversight on the other. So it'd be interesting to hear from the Minister in his closing speech what resources might be provided to councils for this new system. What training are council staff going to receive How will the public know what they can and can't do? And what support will licensed builders get for any changed responsibilities? And the risk is confusion, uneven application, and potentially unsafe buildings. Ruben Davidson earlier rightly highlighted the importance of digital records. Master plumbers in their submission suggested that there are some tools that need to track these buildings nationally, because it's a big change from a sleep out to something that's got plumbing both for the incoming water and for the sewage. Is the government going to fund any digital systems for councils to monitor these buildings, or is it creating yet another unfunded mandate for local government? The legislation was developed quickly. The regulatory impact statement says it was rushed due to the coalition agreement. And as Irena Williams said, not just now, but earlier, there will be things we come back to because they do not work as intended. And there are some important questions that will only be answered in practice. Will insurance costs rise for buildings that are made under this particular area? How will banks treat lending for these dwellings? And what happens if development does overload infrastructure? So I would have suggested that we need some kind of more formal review in 5 years to check on a range of these buildings, whether they've been safe, whether the sewage and electricity infrastructure is functioning as intended. And the estimates suggest somewhere around nearly 8,000, 13,000 additional dwellings over 10 years. That's not exactly tomorrow. It's helpful, but it's modest. Julianne Genter said this is a tiny number given the scale of our housing need. The other thing is these dwellings are going to be scattered. Without strategic coordination for good urban design, transit access, or infrastructure efficiency, these dwellings are not going to reduce car dependency nor emissions. They're not going to support compact, walkable neighbourhoods. Scattered backyard builds are fine to address some narrow needs, but they do not deliver climate-smart cities. This government's preference for urban sprawl in places is not going to help. It also does little for productivity in the construction centre. One-off granny flats are not likely to be standardised. True productivity would come from more coordinated large-scale builds. Also, some of these dwellings are going to be used as Airbnbs. Tamitha Paul brought that point forward. That's fine for tourism, but short-term rentals are not going to solve our housing crisis. So these new dwellings will add some capacity to our housing system. Not all are going to be homes for people in need. Most critically, this bill does absolutely nothing for social housing or addressing homelessness. It doesn't help people, whether they're grannies or solo parents on the public housing wait list or sleeping rough. Those dwellings, these dwellings require existing land and existing money, so to some extent they will help people who are already better off. Tamitha Paul said it plainly, we're in a housing crisis, homelessness is increasing. This government was warned that their policy changes would increase homelessness, and it happened. The Green Party has a petition calling on the government to reverse emergency housing eligibility changes, fund wraparound services to house people and reinstate the public housing build programme. The previous government built over 13,000 public homes, the most since the 1970s. This government has cancelled 3,479 homes, cut $1.5 billion from Aotearoa, and is selling off existing stock. And now they want applause for enabling a few thousand granny flats over a decade. So We will be watching the implementation of this bill closely. We will be continuing to push for much bigger systemic changes, not just to more housing, but to better housing, to housing that uses sustainable materials, to training for building apprentices that's improved and better funded. It's quite hard for people to move to new areas for apprenticeships without rather stronger support. You can look at the changes to the polytechnics, you can take a look at the changes to job seeker, 18 and 19-year-olds. All of these things impact on our ability to provide safe, sustainable, affordable homes. So we have got oversight reduced, the risks remain, and we haven't really addressed our overly prescriptive building code, which holds back innovations like passive housing and energy efficient design. Rather than just deregulating this aspect, we should raise the bar and make it easier to build high quality, long lasting, resilient homes in the right place. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Cameron Luxon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's fantastic to stand up in the third reading of the Building Construction Small Standalone Dwellings Amendment Bill. It's been through a great process in the Select Committee where there was a kumbaya, there was a lot of problems sorted out. It would have been good if the previous Speaker, Celia Wade-Brown, had actually been on the committee, because a whole lot of the questions and issues that she raised were actually answered. I mean, scattered backyard builds, urban sprawl, this is infill by definition, and standardised. These buildings are the almost definition of standardised. There's literally, in the end of this bill, there is a description of what you're allowed to use. Light cladding materials, there is an envelope restriction. Now, I have some issues with the restrictions around the envelope, what a building can actually be built and where it can be located on the site. But hey, we've come to a kumbaya agreement at committee and across this House that we are seeing a way forward. Arena Williams talked about interventions on both sides. This is the type of supply-side intervention we need. We do not need any more demand-side intervention like KiwiBuild and other flops that did nothing but drive up the cost of housing in New Zealand and make that side ungovernable. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Are you seeking a call?
Mr. Speaker,
David Wilson.
Triggered about life jackets.
I stand in support of the Building Construction Small Standalone Dwellings Amendment Bill, third reading, and I know my colleague Andy Foster, who was at the funeral for the late Right Honourable Jim Bolger, would much rather have been speaking to this third reading. However, we're delighted to speak on this third reading. Bill makes it faster and more affordable to build simple, small, standalone dwellings. One part of responding to our housing supply challenges, as was mentioned by our member from the ACT Party, whom I'm seeing we're actually agreeing with today. New Zealand First campaigned on removing consenting costs from small standalone dwellings, aka granny flats, and this was included in our coalition agreement with National. Today we deliver on that promise, as we have delivered on so many other campaign promises. Just another example of the pragmatic solutions-focused, not problems-focused, approach that New Zealand First takes to issues confronting everyday Kiwis. Not really just for grannies, but for anyone wanting to build, own, live in a small standalone dwelling. Just consider the current very tight housing market for our kids and their ability to get into a housing market or any other whānau arrangements such as those mentioned by the member from the Labour Party, such as papakaianga, and those about the Labour Party's influence or what they actually want. Still needs to meet all the insulation standards, as was mentioned by such member. Saves on time, saves the disruption to construction when waiting for a building inspector, saves direct cost of fees, as was mentioned by the Green Party member. A lot of support for the bill, unanimity in the Transport and Infrastructure Committee, who was chaired by none other. Started with 60 square metres. Following consultation prior to the bill being lodged was raised to 70 square metres, another pragmatic change. Many complying buildings will be factory and constructed dwellings able to be transported to site. Now 70 square metres is small, but it still allows good space for kitchen, bathroom, laundry, living area, possibly dining area, 2 bedrooms, so you can deliver a lot and of good quality for a modest price. And we have seen many examples during this process, less than $250,000, which is well under the average building cost for New Zealand. Under this bill, councils are not consent authorities and are not on the liability hook as they are when they have to process normal building consents. What they are required to do is provide upfront the project information memorandum, as the Minister mentioned, identify any hazards and keep records of the finished dwelling and levy any development contributions towards infrastructure, which addresses the Green Party members' concerns earlier. They may also have to oversee any connections to water infrastructure. We will also need to deal with any relevant resource consent issues, if any. Getting more houses built faster creates jobs, creates housing where it's of the need mostly. So we commend this bill to the Parliament. Thank you, sir.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker.
Scott Willis, 5 minutes, split call.
Tēnā koutou e te whare. The Green Party sees housing as a human right, and the government's role is to ensure that there is effective action to increase the supply of warm and cosy homes, secure homes, affordable housing. So we all need shelter, and we all need shelter that will keep us healthy. The Green Party is not opposing this bill, but we do have concerns. Say something nice. Well, unfortunately, just about everything this government has done has made things worse for Kiwis. We're seeing people sleeping on the streets. We're seeing people sleeping on the streets. So this bill promises us, the regulatory impact statement tells us that there's going to be something like 7,800 new buildings in the next decade. KO was building 5,000 homes a year. The Green Party has put forward a proposal to build 7,000 homes a year. So if we think about solutions, this is really a patch-up. It's a PR job to try and deal with the bigger problems. Because if we think about the state homes that have been cancelled, I think particularly about 2 to 12 Albertson Ave and Port Chalmers, Aotearoa put that land up for sale when it was required to. The deadline sale failed. We do not have housing in Port Chalmers and Ōtepoti Dunedin because of their failure to build the homes that were ready to be built. This is government action. I think when you take away one of the biggest levers that the government's got to address housing quality and supply, you make a big mistake. We need more direct intervention. The market is not going to solve the housing crisis. People building small granny flats is not going to help get people into homes. It'll help with some Airbnb, it'll help with some short-term rental, it'll help some people get into homes, but it will not deal with the housing crisis. There is always going to be a section of the market that will not be met because the market solutions do not deliver what we need. They do not deliver shelter for all. I am certainly in favour of seeing housing building construction better. What we'd like to see is an improvement in the code so that we have improvements here. And Cameron's going to say this is all in the bill. Actually, what we haven't got is an understanding of how we can make things better through other methods, such as component building from patterns, using structural insulated panels. These are things that if we really wanted to make a difference, we would be amending the building code to make sure that we can build quickly to code from patterns and from component building. And this is something that certainly I have experience of, and I also live in a community where there are homes that have been built, small homes that have been built, sometimes with a consent, sometimes not. There's not a great difference between the poor quality of those homes, and this is where we see a real risk, because if we don't have an understanding of what sometimes happens with builders or plumbers or electricians when they decide that they've had enough, they've got too many risks, where does that liability fall? This is the real risk that we face with this bill. So it looks like an election slogan without a lot of work done, because we saw through the regulatory impact statement that it was done in a rushed manner because it's part of the coalition agreement. It's just an election slogan. We'll support it.
Dan Bidwar, the member's time. And just before I do, the previous two speakers have not sought the call. Can I remind you, you're required to seek the call, if for no other reason, for the people who are actually up in the broadcasting as well. So can both of you were on your feet not seeking the call, you are required to do so. The risk is if you don't do so, I'll go straight to a vote.
Mr. Speaker,
Dan Bidwar.
I wish to apologise to the previous speaker because I think he's a bit upset that we didn't get to debate the right to repair bill yesterday, his party's bill. And I have one message for the member, which is you've got to show up to this House on time. And Mr. Speaker, I'm here to show up to talk about this good bill that we've got. This is good policy. It's a great example of bipartisanship in this House. It's a practical solution to our housing challenges. And I wish to thank the Minister, the Honourable Chris Penk, great hard-working Minister, for shepherding this bill through the House. I wish to thank the officials who have done a lot of work to really make sure that we can ramp this bill up quickly in record time. I wish to thank my colleagues on the Transport and Infrastructure Select Committee. I look forward to its implementation as a practical way for us to build. I wish to say I look forward to its implementation. Go forward, build, baby, build. I commend this bill to the House.
Shannon Halbert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my privilege today to speak on the Building and Construction Small Standalone Dwellings Amendment Bill. It's always interesting to see my colleague Dan Bidwar comment on other actions and showing up to the House on time when, in fact, I think his own party has issues in getting votes right and practices in this House. But, you know, I'll leave that for him to discuss with his own colleagues. Foot and mouth syndrome, I think, Mr. Speaker. Hey, Mr. Speaker, the last speaker also spoke to this being a practical solution to our housing challenges. And I don't think that that is fair at all. Labor certainly supports this particular piece of legislation. It seeks to reduce the time and cost of building a granny flat by permitting small standalone dwellings up to 70 square metres to be built without obtaining a building consent, given certain conditions are met. Mr. Speaker, those conditions are obviously important, and I acknowledge the Select Committee who have gone through a robust and thorough process collectively to understand both the implications and the opportunities that sit in front of people and homeowners and communities for this legislation to take place. Those conditions are that the granny flat must be simple in its design. It must meet the building code. That building work must be carried out by authorised professionals. That's an important one, of course, because there are, some people that DIY at home, and quality is important there. And thirdly, that councils must be notified prior to and on completion of building work. But going back to, is this a practical solution to our housing challenges? And that member will know that, of course, Glenfield Salvation Army is reporting a homelessness list as he moves around the house uncomfortably. Of 150 people are sitting on that register in our own community. That's the highest that Salvation Army Glenfield have ever reported. That DePaul House in Northcote are seeing the highest number of single kaumātua kuia seniors accessing their support. So by no way is this a practical solution to our housing needs. Saying that, it does provide a suite of opportunities for Aucklanders and Tāmaki Makaurau that they are able to use their property better, and that it's more cost effective for them to do so. We have seen incredible fees applied to people doing works on their homes and in the consent process with Auckland Council. But those costs do have to go back somewhere, and so one of the points raised in an earlier speech is what support is being provided to Auckland Council to assist their part of the role. Because what is at stake, and albeit highlighted in this legislation, is the quality of those facilities that the Labour government, despite doing the largest public housing build since the 1970s, and particularly has been criticised for transitional housing options and using motels as an alternative. Here is a government that is putting up granny flats as that alternative with less regulation in order to enable people to live in a warm, dry home. So there is a balance to be struck here, Mr. Speaker. But we must move forward with caution, with two eyes open on actually addressing the housing crisis in front of us. And we know that under this government over the last 2 years, the construction sector has gone backwards. We've had thousands and thousands, or tens of thousands of people leave our shores who, likely came through New Zealand and the Labour government's apprenticeship scheme. As Labour's tertiary spokesperson, I'm very clear that in the last 2 years we've graduated 9,000 less apprentices in this country. That's on top of the 20-odd thousand that have headed offshore. So, as they scale up the infrastructure investment in this country, finally we really find ourselves short of a skilled workforce that they actually can't deny because they know that it's there. So, let's not play politics on that one. We do need a skilled workforce in order to do that. Mr. Speaker, the granny flats obviously need to have a very simple design element to them. They must meet the building code in there, and this bill provides that a consent-exempt granny flat must be built in accordance with a set of simple design specifications. And I understand that the Select Committee have gone through a process of elimination there, that they do understand that building code very well and the expectations there. Also that the legislation before us, that building work must be carried out by authorised professionals, as I mentioned, and that councils must be notified prior to and upon completion of work. In dense areas where we do see intensified housing across Auckland, that neighbours are very important, of course. So, the better the communication of where you're putting your granny flat is very, very important, that we acknowledge those that live next door, that we're working with them to find the best fit for that neighbourhood and that community and the people that live between each other. The last thing we want to see, of course, is neighbours at war, which can easily happen when building and construction happens in people's property. Mr. Speaker, I'm personally very supportive of this bill. I think it's an easy thing to do for households that can afford to do this. It shouldn't be an expensive exercise. I remember as a teenager that back in my day it wasn't, well, it kind of was a granny flat, but my eldest brother had a converted area in our shed. This is back in the 80s, so similarly I guess that's a granny flat. But it gave people a bit of space, families a bit of space. It also offers the opportunity for kaumātua and kuia to come and live with their loved ones. So, it's not a solution to the housing crisis. Let's be very clear about that. The government has taken us backwards in both building houses, but also growing a skilled workforce for the construction sector. We have a low number of apprentices graduating, but for the average Joe in communities like mine, I think it's a good thing. It enables them to get on and create a granny flat in their backyard, and I really, really support that. So it's one action that the government can take to support people at this time. The cost of living challenges are pretty heavy and we aren't seeing any solutions there. So without further ado, can I acknowledge the Select Committee, the mahi that they've done on the bill, some of the expertise that sit around that table I think are pretty good, and they've come from all angles. So I do certainly support this bill and I commend it to the House.
Carlos Chong.
It is great to hear that this bill received unanimous support from the House. Several speakers have addressed affordable housing, regulation and workforce issues, but I would like to highlight something different. I want to speak for my ethnic communities. For many ethnic communities in New Zealand, including the Pacific and Asian families, multiple generation living is not just practical, it is culture. These families value being close while also respecting each other's needs for privacy and independence. This bill allows the development of small standalone dwellings that support this way of living. It reflects our diversity communities. This reflects our diverse communities and ensure our housing solution meets real families' needs. I commend this bill to the House.
The Honourable Jan Tinetti.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it is a delight and a privilege to be able to speak in the third reading here of the Building and Construction Small Standalone Dwellings Amendment Bill. Mr. Speaker, this is my first time that I've had the ability to be able to have a contribution on this bill. It's something that I'm quite passionate about, believe it or not, that this is an area that I think is a really positive one for this country, and as has been transversed here for Labour here today, we have very supportive of this bill and have been very engaged in the Select Committee process around it. It seems like a sensible change. Mr. Patterson, I'm pleased that you're really engaged in my speech here this morning, that you can call out and support that, so that's really good. Lovely to hear that, Mr. Patterson. So we see this as a sensible change, and we're pleased that what we are pleased about is that the new builds will still have to comply with the building code. That was a concern that we took through into select committee stage and were able to transverse that and able to have that conversation, and we're pleased that the select committee made some sensible changes through into that report as well, and that has been said here this morning in this debate. Mr. Speaker, I heard my colleague Shannon Halbert talk about a granny flat that he grew up with in his house. I was part of a member of a very large family. There were 6 siblings in my family, and we had a very tiny 2-bedroom house that I grew up in. And while it wouldn't have been compliant with this bill, my father did build a granny flat to add to our dwelling to make it a bit more comfortable as a family, but it meant that our family were able to stay together for a lot longer. Wouldn't have been compliant because my father built that and was not a certified personnel member in this particular case, but that's what happened back in those days. It was a very safe dwelling though, and it still stands today. I have to say that this is one of the things that I really think is important, is that the changing nature of our families in this country and in places where it's really important to keep families together, then anything that we can do as a government to help and support that is going to be helpful for those particular families. And I say that from working in a particular place where larger families were more the norm, and it was hard to keep those families together. And in many cases, when they came together, it might have been cousins coming together, back in the 2010s, they would often have to be in garages and in lounges and places like that, and it was very hard for them. So this bill does make that easier. As my colleague Shannon Halbert said, it doesn't solve the housing crisis, and it doesn't go near to solving the housing crisis, but it does help particular families, particular places be able to keep their compositions and make certain that they can stay a family unit. One of the questions that I would have, and I hope that when this bill is looked at and reviewed down the track, that we can see some changes, is will this make a difference to social housing? And I say that because I've had knowledge in just this year, Mr. Speaker, of where a couple of families in my area around me where they were in social housing, they had family, not even extended family, but direct family, who a 16-year-old young woman who had a child was wanting to put a granny flat on that particular social housing, and that had been declined. Unfortunately, there was no emergency housing for that young person and her baby, and she had to live in a tent on the grounds of that house. So I think those are questions that all of us can be taking forward and looking at to see whether that could make a difference for social housing providers to be able to put such dwellings on those pieces of land. So, Mr. Speaker, again, questions for review down the track, but overall, I think this is a really good change. It's a pragmatic change. It won't solve some of the big issues that we have as a country, but it will help certain demographics within the country. So I have no hesitation in commending the bill.
Dr. Hamish Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is a great honour to rise in support of the Building and Construction Small Standalone Dwelling Amendment Bill. We want to increase the supply of housing because currently it's far too hard to build a home in New Zealand. Even the simplest dwellings are tied up in red tape. This is about building houses and homes that New Zealanders need. We want to increase the supply. This is just one measure we're doing. We have also increasing access to overseas products that comply with overseas standards. This is going to really make a difference, because the other thing I'll mention is we've already seen up to 29% of real estate sales going to first home buyers in New Zealand. That's the highest on record. This government is serious about getting houses to New Zealanders. Therefore, I commend this bill to the House.
Kushla Tongiri Manuel.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker. Ko rongo koutou, mai aku hoa mahi kei te whakai a te Pāti Reipa I tēnei kaupapa. Mr. Speaker, I stand in support of this bill, the Building and Construction Small Standalone Dwellings Amendment Bill, as my colleagues have indicated. Mr. Speaker, Jan Tinetti took me on a trip down memory lane. I've said in this House before, one of 9 children and have a very large extended family. And looking after our elders is something that's been entrenched in our whānau. So when I was younger, my grandmother came back to Rangitukia to stay with us, leaving her granny flat here in Titahi Bay to come and spend a couple of years with us so that my cousin, so that my cousin could get disciplined by my mother and also have a bit of a taste of country life. So in that sense, in the sense of keeping whānau together, of course, we naturally support this bill. But Mr. Speaker, easier doesn't necessarily mean accessible. So one of the barriers, which I accept that this bill removes a lot of barriers, and that's why we support it. Because when building on whenua Māori especially, there are enough barriers you have to go through. First of all, to get your whānau together, to look at the land block, and then to get the consent from the shareholders, and then to get your ducks in a row to finally get to Te Kōti Whenua Māori, and then go through that process to get your occupation order or your licence to occupy. That can take years, Mr. Speaker. Once that's done, you then have to go through the process of finding finance, to go through the process of naturally building what often is a dream home on your whenua to which you feel absolutely connected. And sometimes that dream actually becomes a nightmare for so many whānau, Mr. Speaker, because of the laborious process it can be. And that's a bigger picture item for us, I hope, as a whole House to work on removing that barrier and making that easier for whānau. So while that doesn't remove those barriers, this does go some way to helping whānau access housing. While this may not be the express intention of this bill to provide permanent long-term housing, let me tell you, Mr. Speaker, that's what's going to happen. If you drive across not just Ikaroa Rāwhiti, but around the bay, probably a lot of the areas some of the constituent MPs live in, you will see whānau establishing makeshift papakainga. And whether or not that is the intention of this bill, that is what's going to happen. Whānau who don't have access to resources to build their dream home are going to see this as an opportunity to whack up what they will see as housing options, as permanent full-time housing. And the risks that come with that, with the lack of infrastructure required, are health and safety risks, and just, well, quite frankly, we risk Soweto-type situations popping up around communities. And while the price tag of less than $250,000 might seem attractive, that is still far out of reach for a lot of whānau. And I'll go back to the issue of accessing finance, Mr. Speaker. Some of the criteria is such that I know of one person who couldn't get access to a $50,000 mortgage to renovate a family home on Māori land, but he could get a loan to buy a $77,000 vehicle. And so these are the realities that whānau are facing and the risks that come with this legislation while we support it. That said, I want to reflect on the aftermath of Cyclone Gabriel, where we saw whareawhina pop up to support and house whānau from Wairoa all around the East Coast, and visiting a whānau member in Te Wairoa who was so happy to be in her whare awhina, which I think was about 30 metres squared. And why she was happy was because she still got to be on her whenua. So that's a beautiful opportunity that comes with the support that provided and with this bill. It is going to allow people to put something that they want on their whenua. The other positive thing that I want to raise is the opportunity for Māori providers who are already fulfilling builds of this nature. I think of Toitu Tai Rāwhiti, who, referencing Willie Te Aho, who's one of their senior advisors, who has already stated that they have the ability to build these in probably, so they come pre-built to your whenua within around 2 to 3 months. And we know that's a proven record because, as I've said, they have delivered already in situations such as post-Gabriel, and actually there are papakainga popping up around the Tai Rāwhiti and Ikaroa Rāwhiti. Again, just want to support and reflect on the comments of my colleague Shannon Halbert about the workforce that's going to be required to fulfil these whare. Because speaking of post-Gabriel, it was just so amazing to see apprentices in Hawke's Bay, in Ngāti Kahungunu, supporting the builds of houses which now sit at Omahu Marae, who, as we all know, was a beacon of light for all communities post-Gabriel. So these are the considerations that need to be made. I am very pleased for the whānau whom this will serve. Whānau who will see this, for whom this is accessible, who now can build a whare for their kuia, for their kraua, for their mokopuna in their backyard, and also build a dwelling on their whenua so they can be grounded and connected and be where they want to be. Nā reira, e te māngai o te whare, kei te tautoko awau I tēnei pire.
Whataboutisms. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm thrilled to be the last speaker on this bill, the Building and Construction Small Standalone Dwellings Amendment Bill. This bill will go a long way to solving some of the issues some of my constituents have building on their land. And in particular, I'm thinking of one who I've been dealing with recently, so Gordon, I hope this helps solve your problem. So with that, I commend this bill to the House.
Very good. The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Building and Construction Small Standalone Dwellings Amendment Bill, third reading.
I call on Government Order of the Day number 2.
Interrupted debate on the second reading of the Crimes Countering Foreign Interference Amendment Bill.
Mr. Speaker.
Francisco Hernandez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise on behalf of the Green Party of Aotearoa, New Zealand to speak against the Crimes Countering Foreign Interference Amendment Bill. While we do believe that it's important to ensure New Zealand is protected from genuine threats of foreign interference, we believe this legislation does not ensure sufficient protection for civil liberties and democratic freedoms. This was a sentiment that was echoed in the committee, in the submission stage of the committee process. The committee received 705 submissions, 49 of which were accompanied by all submissions to the committee. And out of those 705 submissions, 620 submitters opposed the bill, 34 supported it, and the remaining 51 were either unclear or did not take a position on this bill. So we shared the concerns by the submitters that this legislation could be used against environmental advocates, trade unions, human rights groups, and Indigenous peoples. And the recommendations in the departmental report and from this select committee have not alleviated this. We do believe that the legislation is written in such a vague way that it could encapsulate, for example, I've already wished the members a happy Filipino restaurant week yesterday, and I did that just because I saw that it was Filipino restaurant week. But if the Filipino embassy had contacted me and asked me to share posts related to Filipino restaurant week under the really vaguely defined provisions of legislation, me posting that and encouraging people to celebrate Filipino restaurant week could constitute could potentially constitute as a crime if you interpret it that under this legislation. That's how loosely defined this legislation could be, and that's why we have serious concerns. And because the Crown's record in this regard is not good, we only have to look at the Aotearoa raids and the history of espionage in a domestic way to see that. We consider that the new offences created represent state overreach and a significant threat to civil liberties, particularly the right to peacefully protest and organise, the right to privacy, and the right to voice one's own personal political opinions or opinions about restaurants, for that matter. References to foreign power and what it means to act for on behalf of a foreign are too broad and have not addressed the concerns of many submitters. Intelligence agencies often highlight concerns about foreign influence from countries such as China and Russia, for example, but there's no clarity on how this bill will address, if at all, the influence of Five Eyes countries and the additional complexities of navigating those relationships. And I'll give you an example of that complexity. There's widespread public concern about the presence of law enforcement FBI office being opened here in Wellington, particularly around the level of coordination and cooperation in law enforcement and policing matters, and the relationship between our security services. And it took everyone by surprise, and especially the Trade Minister, Todd McClay, because the very next day we got pinged with 50% tariffs. We actually felt a bit sorry for him. They let this lot set up shop, including a FBI HQ right in our capital, and they said thank you with tariffs. We've had ministers say that this wasn't about China, but then the person who came over to open the office, Kash Patel, reiterated that it actually is about countering China. This is not a simple administrative move, and it's not just an intelligence liaison. This is an expansion of foreign surveillance power into our soil under the banner of cooperation and security. So is that foreign interference? This legislation doesn't count itself, but apparently we can just invite them. This appearance to step over successive governments' claims on independent foreign policy and continues the trend that we've seen under this government of being aligned to the United States rather than compared with other partners and our neighbors in the Pacific. We should not accept that our membership of the Five Eyes means we should be open to agencies from within that group. We are not another state in Donald Trump's United States. There's also insufficient clarity on how this would address foreign interference from powerful multinational corporations who might owe no allegiance to any foreign power. References to benefiting a foreign power are also too subjective and broad. The implications of this are numerous, and I've already mentioned the right to peacefully protest could be threatened by accusations of being a protest movement in service of a foreign power. We are also concerned that consultation with Māori was inadequate, particularly given the submitters' concerns around the state's port record and the risk that this legislation could unfairly target Māori, particularly for aspirations of tino rangatira and mana motate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks for the opportunity to speak on this bill. There's three things that I want to touch on in terms of amendments that came through the Select Committee. The replacing enemy alien as a word with citizen of a state at war with New Zealand, just to make that really clear what that reference related to. Secondly, making it a question of law whether a person owes allegiance to New Zealand. So a judge will make that decision instead of a jury, and that was a suggestion of the Law Society. And finally, a safeguard for protesters to ensure that engaging in protest advocacy or industrial action would not, by itself, be criminalised. So I commend the bill to the House.
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Phil Twyford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm really glad to be able to have a chance to contribute to this second reading debate on the Crimes Countering Foreign Interference Amendment Bill. I wanted to say a couple of things about why I think this bill is important and why it's worthy of serious debate in the House. The motivation here is to protect our democracy, and when we look around the world right now, democracy is under threat in so many places. It's under threat from right-wing populism, it's under threat from governments who deliberately set out to undermine democratic institutions, to ignore the basic human rights standards that have been
really the foundation of democratic systems for more than a century. I would note that both of these things are going on right now in the United States, a country that much of the world has looked to as a pinnacle of democracy for a long time. The rise of unregulated, unchecked social media. For so many reasons, our democracies are under threat. And foreign interference, the deliberate, covert interference, including in elections, is also a feature of the international landscape right now. And the Russians have been identified often as one of the worst culprits in this respect, but they're not the only ones. And we have no reason to think that little old New Zealand at the bottom of the South Pacific is likely to be immune from these kinds of pressures. I want to acknowledge the concerns that were raised by our Green Party colleagues. This is something that warrants careful and thoughtful balance here. And it's only, historically, it's not very long since the anti-communist witch hunts of the 1950s. Think about the McCarthyite hounding of people both in politics and the entertainment industry, in fact, all walks of life in the United States, where anti-communism and geopolitics was used as a pretext to suppress absolutely legitimate political dissent in a liberal democracy. It's not very long since that happened. And you think of the government of Sid Holland, the National Party Prime Minister from 1949 in New Zealand. We had plenty of our own echoes of exactly the same phenomenon when geopolitics and anti-communism were used to crack down on critics of the government of the day, and I think about the Bill Such case and others. So we're not immune to all that, but by the same token, it's very clear, and our intelligence agencies have provided plenty of evidence that there is foreign interference that is covert and deceptive activity taking place that at least arguably could undermine New Zealand's core national interests. And so I think we have to take that seriously. I want to talk about the elephant in the room in this debate, and that is the quite well publicised activities of operatives from the Chinese government who have been engaging in what I think, in the terms of the way that foreign interference is defined in this bill, their activities would qualify as foreign interference. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm not an advocate for a kind of new Cold War mentality about the rise of China. In fact, I regard myself as a principled critic of this government's headlong rush into the arms of the United military alliance, effectively with the United States, to counter China's growing strength in the Asia-Pacific region. In my view, and I think it's the view of my colleagues too, the relationship with China is one of our most important foreign policy relationships. We have an enormous amount at stake, not just in economic terms and trade, but China is already a great power in our region. And we need to conduct our relationship with China in a way that's calm and thoughtful and mature. There is far too much at stake to cast China as some kind of military a villain in our region and a military threat to New Zealand. It's not. The biggest threat, actually, is what would be a catastrophic war between China and the US in Asia. And our foreign policy, we need to be doing everything we can to avoid that. We need to be a voice for peace and negotiation and détente. So I'm not a new Cold War guy in terms of our relationship with China. But I do think that we need to be candid with our friends in China and in the Chinese government and say publicly and openly that foreign interference activity in New Zealand is not acceptable. And I represent, as a local MP in West Auckland, I represent a substantial community of Chinese New Zealanders. They are New Zealanders. They live here, they have the right to stay here, they have contribute to this country, they are making a new life, and their human rights are just as important as the human rights of any other person in this country. And so when I see reported incidences of people in the community being intimidated, when there is threats that are alleged or implied against the family members back in China of people who might be considered to be dissenters or dissidents here, that is completely unacceptable. And there is a word for it, and it's transnational repression. And there are a number of countries around the world who engage in transnational repression, where they basically send their operatives to put pressure on people in the diaspora to try and keep them in line. I also find it's also, in my view, unacceptable that the Chinese government, through its United Front Works Department, deploys resources of the state to influence the behaviour and the publicly expressed opinions of the diaspora communities in New Zealand by controlling and influencing Chinese language media outlets who serve the diaspora communities in New Zealand. That is not okay. And when I read reports of the deliberate influencing and the distribution of funds through community-based associations and organisations who serve our Chinese diaspora communities in New Zealand in order to exercise influence in a covert way, I don't believe that is acceptable. And so, as a member of this House, I want to say to the Chinese government, New Zealand values the relationship with China. We are inextricably bound together. We share the Asia-Pacific region. Our destinies are intertwined. And we have a very important and growing Chinese diaspora community in New Zealand. It's been around for a long time, back to the 1800s, and today it is growing fast. These are New Zealanders who contributed enormously to our society. And we expect that their human rights and civil rights will be respected and that they will not be used in a way that's instrumental in what we regard, and certainly in the terms of the bill that we are debating in the House today, in ways that we regard as foreign interference. And I think, sir, for those reasons, this bill is very important. It's about a protection to our democracy. I've spoken about China as an example, but there are many other countries around the world, like Afghanistan, like Iran and others, who engage in transnational repression. It is not good enough, and I think this bill actually is a good and useful move to address those issues.
Tom Rutherford.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Great to speak on the Crimes Countering Foreign Interference Amendment Bill, which we considered on the Justice Select Committee, and it was great to engage with that. Let's just be really clear about what the legislation is intending to do here. It's about strengthening the criminal law and providing a means to better hold people accountable for undertaking foreign interference. That's ultimately what the legislation is all about. There is some foreign states that try to influence what people in other countries do. And this is simply providing a means to better hold people accountable for undertaking foreign interference, and as such, I commend the bill to the House.
Honourable Peter Kennedy.
Kia ora, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to this bill. Mr. Speaker, I'm not on this committee, however I am a proud member of the Foreign Affairs and Defence and Trade Committee, one of probably the hardest working committee, certainly from my perspective. But these matters go hand in hand is the point here. When we consider our relations with foreign, in the foreign sphere, we consider the way that we interact with other nations abroad, but also here domestically. These things must be considered hand in hand, Mr. Speaker. My colleague, the Honourable Phil Twyford, I thought gave a very good speech about the fine balance being struck here, about trying to make sure that we can continue to protect our citizens here in New Zealand, protect also the right in a free democracy to have the right for advocacy, to have the right for protest, but also making sure that we continue to protect the sovereignty of New Zealand, the democracy we all enjoy, and also the rights of citizens here in New Zealand. So I thought Mr. Twyford made a very good contribution on this bill, and I think of the speeches in this House in light of the most recent threat assessment that has been completed by our agencies as a background to some of my thinking with respect to this bill. How we must continue to act in our best interest, how we must continue to make sure that when we look towards the geopolitical challenges that the world finds itself in today, and how ever-evolving that is, how we must make sure that the legislation is fit for purpose today, but also lends itself to an opportunity for the evolution of that legislation, given the ever-evolving situation of foreign affairs matters around the world. It is a tricky time. It is a tricky time, and I think it's naive for many of our people out in New Zealand who often sit in ignorance to many of the challenges that they face, that many of the challenges that this country faces. And I think of some recent examples, whether it's what seems like a benign kind of cyber attack or phishing, if we will, or whether or not it is something far more sinister. And we've seen occasions of that where we know on the regular basis our public institutions are constantly under attack in those spaces, all for the access to data, to public and to private information. And when we look towards a piece of legislation or an apparatus that is designed to deter, but also to define, and also where appropriate, look towards an appropriate punishment for those that do enter into that particular space of what we're covering here around terrorism, countering foreign interference. We've got to make sure that it is able to answer the questions that many have on instances that we are aware of, that we are clear on. And Mr. Twyford spoke to some of the well-documented, the publicly known instances where there has been cases where it's been proven that there has been interference, foreign interference, but also cases where it has been proven that it doesn't quite meet that threshold, or that in fact we might have had a rogue or a person acting on their own. So there have been those instances, certainly in my time here in Parliament. So we're looking to support this bill and continue to remind the House, though, that on a day when communities across the country are striking, that we must continue to respect and also protect the ability for our people here in this country for peaceful protest, advocacy and industrial action. So it's rather fitting that we continue to speak and discuss this bill on a day when New Zealanders look towards taking to the streets to prove their point in the industrial action space, rallying against the moves by this government with respect to their pay. So, Mr. Speaker, we support this bill. Like I said, we take it from my perspective on the committee that I, myself and yourself sit on. We must think of it in its entirety, in its context within international affairs, and of course the security of our democracy here at home.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to take a call on the crimes legislation countering foreign interference amendment bill, and as my colleague or my friend, the Honourable Penny Henare, said, as a member of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee, I have an interest in this. Foreign interference, Mr. Speaker, from any country is simply unacceptable and often disrupts the rights of New Zealanders, including their right to freedom of expression. So this legislation will help to ensure that our criminal law is fit for purpose to address what we see as a harmful activity, and will better equip the relevant agencies to hold people to account, and I commend the bill to the House.
Oh, very good.
Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Jenny Anderson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on this bill. It was an interesting process at Select Committee to hear submissions and to understand the nature of some of the threats that this bill is designed to counter. In particular, the instances that were provided at Select Committee revolve around members of the New Zealand community who have Chinese connections and have been in situations of protest against issues that are occurring in China, and there were instances where there had been pressure put upon them not to be able to protest in New Zealand, to the point where sometimes there was a physical threat to prevent that protest from happening. We have a very strong view on Labour that irrespective of what your country of origin, if you are a New Zealander, you have every right and privilege of a New Zealander, and that includes the right to be able to protest about whatever you want to as a free citizen. We believe that's a fundamental part of our democracy, and we believe that no other nation state has the right to interfere in our democratic processes here in New Zealand. The bill essentially seeks to deter, detect and respond to covert actions by powers that threaten our sovereignty, our democracy and the safety of those who call this country home. Let me be clear from the outset, Mr. Speaker, Labour supports robust measures to protect New Zealand's democratic institutions from foreign interference, and in this day and age that is more important than ever before. It's important that people can rely upon information and make up their own minds and be able to participate freely in a democracy. We live in a world where state-sponsored disinformation, cyber attacks and coercive diplomacy have become tools of influence on the international stage, and it is only right that our legal framework evolves to meet these modern challenges, and that is what this bill attempts to do. It's important to note, Mr. Speaker, that this is qualified. We recognise the importance of acting decisively, but also the importance of acting wisely and being fully informed. When governments expand the powers of the state, particularly in the realm of national security, they must also do with precision, accountability and transparency. Labour's position is that while the bill is a necessary step, it must be accompanied by strong safeguards, resourcing and oversight to ensure that it protects our democracy, not only from foreign interference, but also from overreach at home. The main points I would like to make today is the importance of defending New Zealand's sovereignty and democratic values, and also the importance of having a broader, more coherent national security strategy, one that earns, not assumes, public trust, and that is so important. At its core, this bill is about protecting our independence of decision making, the ability of our people here in New Zealand and institutions to shape our future without external manipulation. That is so important, Mr. Speaker. Foreign interference can take place in many shapes, and sometimes we're not even aware of that. It can involve covert funding of political activities, attempts to intimidate members of ethnic communities, cyber attacks designed to steal sensitive data or disrupt government operations. We've seen examples of this behaviour internationally, and we would be naive to assume Aotearoa is not immune to this. That's right. The National Security Strategy released in 2023 was right to identify foreign interference as a key and growing threat. However, that recognition must now be backed by substance and capability. The gaps that this bill seeks to close are real, but also too are the risks with acting without balance. We cannot defend democracy by weakening the very principles that underpin it. Laws designed to target foreign interference must be precisely defined and proportionately applied, ensuring they do not have a chilling effect on the legitimate political activity, advocacy or even dissent, especially amongst diaspora communities who already face pressure from authoritarian regimes abroad. Labour will therefore continue to seek assurances that these laws will not be misused to target individuals exercising their democratic rights, to silence critics under the guise of security and make sure New Zealand is protecting its democracy and protecting its freedom of expression as much as it means countering covert influence. Mr. Speaker, this bill has some big changes, and I'd just like to outline what some of those changes are. Targeting foreign interference offences. This bill has the introduction of a foreign interference offence. It squarely criminalises covert, deceptive, corruptive or coercive activity undertaken on behalf of a foreign power to harm New Zealand's core interests, including national security, elections and human rights. This provides a clearer pathway for authorities to prosecute those who intentionally or recklessly act against our democratic integrity, and it is a necessary change. However, we also urge the government to ensure clear prosecution thresholds and judicial oversight accompany these powers. Vague or overly broad definitions risk unintended consequences, and the line between influence and interference is not always clear, and the law must be careful not to blur that. This bill also clarifies allegiance and espionage liability. It's clarification when a person owes allegiance to a sovereign in the right of New Zealand. It may seem technical, but it is an important fix. This provides greater certainty for charging individuals for serious crimes such as espionage offences, which go to the very heart of the loyalty of the state. Labour remains concerned about how this principle is applied to dual citizens or long-term residents, and whether the government needs to make sure it fully considers its diplomatic implications in this space. In terms of protecting government information, we support the expansion of those offences that are related to unauthorised disclosure of government information, including explicit coverage of military tactics and sensitive data held by a wider range of public bodies. Mr. Speaker, good national security law is precise, not broad. It is balanced, not blunt. This legislation alone will not keep New Zealand safe. Foreign interference is not only a criminal problem, it is a societal challenge that demands our awareness, our resilience, and coordination across all levels of government and community. This bill must sit within a broader strategy, one that equips New Zealand's public sector, local government, academic institutions, businesses, and communities with the knowledge and tools that they require to identify and resist foreign interference. Under the previous Labour government, we took steps to modernise our national security approach and strengthen agency cooperation, but that work must continue. We want to continue to see this government have a clear plan to resource and implement these capabilities effectively. Passing a law is one thing, but ensuring it works in practice is another. Yeah. We must also make sure our communities are aware that we are resourcing these aspects, as that is also incredibly important. We must be transparent with the public about the nature of the threat that we face. If the government wants communities to be resilient, then communities must be trusted as partners in this conversation, not passive recipients of state protection. Finally, we must ensure that countering external coercion, we do not become coercive ourselves. National security should never be an excuse for secrecy that excludes scrutiny. Oversight mechanisms are essential to maintaining that level of public trust. Mr. Speaker, New Zealand's democracy is one of our greatest assets, built on transparency, fairness and freedom. Those values are what foreign interference seeks to erode, and those values must also guide how we respond. Labor supports the intent of this bill because we believe our country must be equipped to defend itself from covert manipulation. But we will continue to push for stronger safeguards, resourcing and oversight to ensure the defence of democracy never comes at the cost of democracy itself. Protecting New Zealand's sovereignty is not the task of one party or one government, it is a shared responsibility. And in that spirit, we support the bill moving forward while holding the government to account for how it is implemented. I commend this bill to the House.
Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to be able to rise in the second reading of this bill, the Crimes Countering Foreign Interference Amendment Bill, and I'm appreciative of the 49 oral submitters and 705 submitters in general that expressed their concerns, and some of those concerns were listened to. Well, they were all listened to, but there were some amendments that were made as a result. I'm grateful for them expressing their concerns, and I'm grateful that we're going forward with this bill. I commend it to the House.
Well done, Reba. The question is that the amendments recommended by the Justice Committee by majority be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. Party vote has been called for. The clerk will conduct the party vote.
New Zealand National.
49 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour.
Tori tekau mā whā e whakai.
Green Party of Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Te kau marima ngā poti whakahe.
Act New Zealand.
11 votes in favour.
New Zealand First.
8 votes in favour.
Party Māori.
The ayes are 102 and the noes are 15. The question is agreed to. The question is that the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Crimes Countering Foreign Interference Amendment Bill, second reading.
This bill is set down for committee stage next sitting day. I call on Government Order of the Day number 3.
Disputes Tribunal Amendment Bill, third reading.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the Disputes Tribunal Amendment Bill be now read a third time. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to present this bill to the House. The Disputes Tribunal Amendment Bill amends the Disputes Tribunal Act 1988 to increase the financial jurisdiction of the tribunal from $30,000 to $60,000. The aim is to improve access to quick, low-cost dispute resolution so that people can resolve their disputes without about claims of higher value, those over $30,000 going up to $60,000. In doing so, the bill enhances access to justice by providing an affordable forum for resolving more lower value claims, and it's estimated that up to 2,000 claims a year could benefit from this process. Mr. Speaker, the bill enhances access to justice for people who either cannot afford to take a claim to the district court or choose not to because of the associated fees will exceed the value of the claim they're pursuing. In essence, Mr. Speaker, we've got quite a good, efficient system that works for smaller claims up to $30,000, and for a long time that figure hasn't been adjusted. There's been a lot of inflation, and we think it makes sense to extend that boundary further to $60,000. A practical, pragmatic thing that will make a difference to the many hard-working New Zealanders who just want to get on with their lives, get their disputes resolved in a timely fashion. Mr. Speaker, this increase in the jurisdiction addresses this justice gap, provide benefits to new claimants, new people that would have either abandoned it. Mr. Speaker, the Disputes Tribunal is one of the fastest disposal rates of all the courts and tribunals in New Zealand, and is one of the busiest forums in the civil justice system. And I just actually want to take the opportunity to thank all the people in the court system working across this tribunal for the work they do on behalf of all New Zealanders. I don't think we take the opportunity to thank the people who work in our courts often, because though sometimes they work in stressful environments under a lot of pressure, they do their best for the community, and we should acknowledge them today. Mr. Speaker, the Tribunal was resourced through a combination of user pays and Crown funding. This recognises the Tribunal's public and private benefits. The bill also amends the Disputes Tribunal Rules 1989 to introduce a new filing fee tier of $468 for claims of $30,001 or more to aid with cost recovery and reflect the higher private benefits of using the Tribunal for higher value claims. So, this is the only fee users pay. Whilst the new fee tier might seem as a barrier to justice, it's a very small portion of the potential value of the claim. Disputes Tribunal proceedings remain significantly cheaper than bringing proceedings to the district courts, where court and legal costs are incurred throughout the case. Government's also separately progressing a proposal through the Regulatory Systems Tribunal Amendment Bill, which will give the disputes referees the discretion to order the respondent to repay the cost of filing fees to a wholly or partially successful applicant. This will help ensure the costs of pursuing justice do not fall solely on those who have been wronged. Mr. Speaker, the bill will ensure the Disputes Tribunal will continue to operate as an affordable and accessible way to resolve disputes and will improve access to justice for more people. Mr. Speaker, in the justice space, we're focused on restoring law and order, but we're also focused on speeding up the wheels of justice so people can get on with their lives, get their disputes resolved and continue prospering and doing well like everybody aspires to do in this country. And on that basis, Mr. Speaker, I commend this bill to the House.
The question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Jenny Anderson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This bill, Labor supports the aim of increased access to justice and supports this bill, and that includes an increase to the financial jurisdiction of the Disputes Tribunal. In essence, Mr. Speaker, what this bill does is it amends the Disputes Tribunal Act by increasing the jurisdiction of the Disputes Tribunal from $30,000 to $60,000. This will mean that people who cannot afford to take a claim to the district court or who choose not to because of the associated fees exceeds the value of their claim would indeed be able to access Disputes Tribunal for those claims. The bill also introduces a filing fee of $468 for those claims over $30,000. We're incredibly lucky in New Zealand to have our disputes tribunal system. It really enables greater access to justice, and that's why we support this bill. It's a simple but important reform that will make a real difference to the thousands of New Zealanders who are seeking justice in a fair, affordable and timely way. It keeps our courts from being clogged up, and it enables issues which have become problematic to be resolved more quickly. Mr. Speaker, the Disputes Tribunal plays a really crucial role and is often unsung in what they do in our justice system. It is often referred to as the People's Court, the place where ordinary New Zealanders can resolve civil disputes without any great cost and the complexity of lawyers or the long delays of the formal court system. Around 11,000 people each year use the tribunal to sort out their issues. While small by the standards of the higher courts, they can be absolutely life-changing for those people involved. The tribunal was designed to make justice accessible, and it will continue to do that with this change today. Over time, the realities of inflation and the rising cost of living have eroded the value of the $30,000 limit. What might once have been considered a substantial claim, now often a modest one, especially if you are a small business, a contractor, or even tenants trying to recover what they are owed. As a result, more and more people have been forced to give up a claim that they're wanting to pursue in order to have their case heard, and that is not fair, and that is not justice. We heard of some of these instances where someone has paid, it was a master's student who was paid $9,000 for a full year's work. She was owed $41,000 in total, but to bring her case to the tribunal, she had to forego more than a quarter of what she owed. She was quite literally had to choose between cutting her losses or facing the costs and delays of the formal court process. And that instance is precisely what this bill seeks to fix today. By raising the cap to $60,000, around 2,000 more claimants each year will be able to pursue the full value of their claims before the tribunal. For them, this is not just an abstract number, it is wages owed, work completed, deposits unfairly withheld, or contracts broken. These are disputes that affect people's livelihoods, their business, their sense of fairness and their mental health, Mr Speaker. Access to justice is the cornerstone of a fair society, and Labor has always believed that justice should not depend on the size of your wallet or your ability to hire a lawyer. The Disputes Tribunal, with its low filing fees and its straightforward process, embodies that principle. It allows people to come forward and tell their story, to be heard, to get a decision without being drowned in legal costs. Updating its jurisdiction is about keeping that promise alive in a modern and challenging economic circumstances. This bill also allows referees to order that a losing party reimburse the successful applicant's filing fee. That might sound like a small change, but it's symbolically important. When someone wins their case, they should not be left out of pocket for simply accessing justice. It reinforces the idea that fairness should be practical as well as philosophical. Now, some have questioned whether increasing the tribunal's cap will overburden it, but the evidence that we received is otherwise. The Ministry of Justice modelling shows that the system can absorb this change and that only a modest increase in the caseload is expected. The tribunal's referees are highly skilled and already deal with a wide range of complex and different issues that they resolve. This bill simply allows them to hear more of the cases that are already coming through the door, but which currently fall just outside of their reach. Labor also notes the recommendation of the Rules Committee last year, which suggested an even higher cap to $70,000 or even $100,000 by consent, along with clearer appeal rights. We support the government taking steps in that direction, and we will continue to encourage a broader look at just how our civil justice system serves ordinary New Zealanders. There is still more work to streamline the enforcement and to ensure that the tribunal decisions can be upheld without the added cost and delay of going back through the district court. But today, Mr Speaker, this bill represents a meaningful and positive step forward. It modernises an important institution and it recognises the economic realities that many New Zealanders are facing today. We should not have a situation where people are deciding whether to pursue a claim or whether to be able to pay their rent or pay their bills, because access to justice is fundamental. This change makes justice more accessible for those who need it the most. In a time when the cost of living is biting hard, ensuring people can recover what they are owed without spending thousands more to do so is not just good law, it's common sense. Mr Speaker, this bill is practical, it's fair and it's overdue. It upholds the principle that justice should be available to every single New Zealander, not just those who are able to afford it. It gives more New Zealanders the confidence to stand up for themselves, to know their rights, and it helps keep our justice system working for the many, not just the few. For those reasons, we are proud to support this bill. Labor has opposed an amendment at Select Committee to introduce a fees waiver for the filing fee on the basis of hardship, reflecting the existing practice of the District Court. A Court of New Zealand Rules Committee, as I mentioned, has already referred to increasing that. It's important to note that we will be bringing some more changes at the committee stage. We think there's further improvements that can be made to strengthen this bill, and it's important that we discuss those in full. A Court of New Zealand, there's been we feel a missed opportunity, that there have been a number of other improvements that could have been made to this Act. Those include clarifying the subject matter jurisdiction of the tribunal, which is currently limited and could be expanded to include other disputes. For example, Mr Speaker, those related to land or intellectual property. We know that could be further strengthened. We also do have some concerns around the $468 filing fee. We consider that this may well be a barrier to some people bringing legitimate claims before the tribunal. There are legitimate reasons for a filing fee to cover the costs associated with the dispute resolution process. However, $468 is high to many New Zealanders right now, significantly higher than the $260 filing fee for the District Court, and there is no associated fees waiver on the basis of hardship. there is such a waiver for the district court. So we believe it's not right that there should be a fees waiver for the district court fee, but no fees waiver for a disputes tribunal, which would be a lower form. $60,000 is not an insignificant amount of money. A finding either way in $60,000 could have a really significant financial return for either party. $60,000 exceeds the limit in which a no asset insolvency is available. So while we support the bill in principle and we look forward to it going forward, that we think it can be strengthened, and we will be working to provide those suggestions and those changes during the committee stage. Apologies for that. So we think it further could be strengthened, but we agree that in a time that it is incredibly difficult for many New Zealanders, it is important that we note that the cost of living continues to be a real problem, and we believe that that filing fee is not sufficient. Apologies on that, I've been rushed this morning, but we did put those suggestions through. They have not been made to the bill, and we still believe that that filing fee is too high, and it will be prohibitive to those who want to pursue justice through the courts. It's a good change, but it could have been strengthened further. And so, Mr. Speaker, we think that in future we would like to revise some of those changes to make access to justice even more available to those people. And even no matter how many properties someone might own, everyone should be able to go forward and pursue their claims in the tribunal.
Dr. Lawrence Zena.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise on behalf of the Green Party of Aotearoa, New Zealand, to also support the Disputes Tribunal Amendment Bill. Now, we've supported this bill since the first reading because we do think that what the bill is intending to do in terms of raising the financial jurisdiction of the Disputes Tribunal from 30,000 to 60,000 is a good one, and we will see that more claims will be made, and that it will hopefully alleviate some of the burden that we have seen on other parts of the court system. In saying that, again, something like this in terms of increasing the financial jurisdiction is not new. We have seen numerous increases over the last few decades. However, the threshold that we're currently seeing in terms of going from 30,000 to 60,000 is probably the most significant increase that we've seen in a while. I just want to touch on a few things, Mr. Speaker, that we did discuss during the committee stage. Again, while the bill is not the most substantial in terms of length, there are a lot of implications in terms of the operationalization of a bill like this and what it means for the people of Aotearoa, New Zealand. One of the things that we sort of discussed at length is around, I guess, the policy intent in the first place of the rationale of increasing from 30,000 to 60,000. And one of the things is whether other considerations have been made in terms of other ways to alleviate some of the pressures that we're seeing in our court system, again, being one of the a key component of the rationale for this bill. Now, one of the other things that we've also mentioned, so, in terms of the discussions that we had at the committee stage with the minister in the chair, we're happy in terms of the increase of the threshold from 30,000 to 60,000. But the other thing that we've kind of discussed at length during that committee stage is around the increase of the filing fee here from $234 to $468. Now, while on paper, it looks like, we've increased the threshold or doubling the existing threshold from 30,000 to 60,000. Ergo, it makes sense to double the filing fee as well. A key challenge is in terms of the significant increase of that threshold. Again, this is the most significant increase in the financial jurisdiction threshold for the disputes tribunal that we have seen in a while. And the key aspect is here is, if you are making a claim that is $30,001, your filing fee will also be doubled in response to that. And whether we think that that is actually the right setting, and whether other things could have been considered that phase in or proportionalize the filing fee. Because again, for a lot of people now, during the, a cost of living crisis, $234 for filing fee for disputes tribunal is not insignificant. But now you are doubling that. That $468 is a lot of money for a lot of people. While we're at the committee stage, there is the rationale, the assumption, there is an assumption that was made because there was no genuine evidence of this, other than the fact that as both from the minister but also from the officials, the assumption being that if you were to make a claim that could be $30,000 and above, theoretically that you will be able to fork out the $468 of filing fee, or if you are going to be successful in getting your claim, or either way, that you are able to have that filing fee reimbursed. But Mr. Speaker, that still rely on the fact that people need to have that filing fee and that cash up front and pay for that application in the first place. And while people can now make a claim up to $60,000, it is not, there is no empirical evidence that we have seen throughout the committee stage that suggests that there's any sort of, other than assumption, any rationale behind people making claims above $30,000 naturally have nearly $500 that they're able to pay for this in the first place. Which is one of the reasons why the Greens supported the Labour Party's amendment from the Honourable Dr. Duncan Webb in terms of having an opportunity to look at hardship, in hardship situations that the filing fee could be waived. Now we see that ability to waive filing fees or to waive certain court fees in other jurisdictions, particularly in the higher courts. But we don't get to see that in disputes tribunal because again, the idea is that the smaller courts, the assumption being that the smaller courts like the tribunal will remain significantly cheaper for the applicants than bringing proceedings in a district court. But district court have that ability for hardship and for considerations and for waiver of that fund. So we are disappointed that the government hasn't decided to consider that particular option of a waiver because it would be in line with the idea of natural justice and also in terms of being a democratic society and the people's ability, everyone's ability to access justice as a rule of law here in Aotearoa. Now, there are a couple of other considerations that we've made during that committee stage. One of them is also a lengthy discussion, both in terms of the select committee stage, but also in terms of the committee stage around the fact that, dispute tribunal being a smaller tribunal and being, something where lawyers may not always be needed, may not always be represented, is the ability for people now with the increased financial jurisdiction, the ability for people to be able to seek additional support if they're in a situation of hardship, such as legal aid or other forms of advice, such as community law, using community law centers. So again, it was something that it fundamentally comes down to, with the increase in financial jurisdiction, will we be seeing a more prominent role that's being played by the dispute tribunal, and how are people able to rightfully access some of that services, and whether those kind of now, with a higher filing tier threshold, and also the ability for people to now increase that to claim or to apply, make an application of up to $60,000, whether there should be more awareness or more allowances being given to access some of the, the universal or free services that we are seeing that are currently being used in other services and other services and other courts. Mr. Speaker, overall, like I said in the beginning, the Green Party understands the policy intent of this bill, and we do see this being a good step. And again, there are precedence of increase in terms of the financial jurisdiction. However, which is one of the reasons why the Greens supports this bill. However, it also must we need to say, we also need to address the broader challenges that we're seeing in our court system around the ability for people to access justice. We have seen certain improvements that are being made in terms of access to justice across various jurisdictions. But as the minister himself have said right at the beginning, we're seeing an approach and we're seeing a bottleneck because of the approach that the government has decided to take that may not be in line or may not be providing stress relief, I guess, in some ways, to the court system, which is why we're seeing a bill such as this. So there is a general concern in terms of whether the ability for us to relieve some of the higher courts, such as the district court and above, in terms of having some of that being allowed to be put through the district tribunal, actually in some ways fail to address the bigger issue we're having in our court system, which is that we're not being able to process bills fast enough. Yes, there are other bills that are being introduced in the House, such as the Judicature Timeliness Bill, but we're not seeing that being responsive enough to what our communities really need in this current environment, particularly, in terms of the number of judges. Yes, increase the district court judge by 1, increase the high court judge by 2. I'm not going to listen to someone who is a tobacco lobbyist, frankly. So I'm going to keep on going with what I'm saying, which is broadly in line with the bill and the intention of this bill.
Point of order, Honourable Casey.
That was clearly a slight to my comments to the member, and suggesting that I'm a tobacco lobbyist is something that he should withdraw and apologise for.
Did you take personal offence to that? Yes. The member might want to offer.
I withdraw and apologise, Mr. Speaker.
Dr. Rowan.
But this does bring a broader question, because this is relevant to the bill, because this is the intention of the bill, which is address the bottleneck and the pressure on our court system. So we would seek that the government actually do more to genuinely fix the court system.
Todd Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, it gives me great pleasure to rise and speak in this third reading of the Disputes Tribunal Amendment Bill. Acting government is about actually fixing what matters, and this is an important bill that adds to everything that the government and ACT is doing to actually support our court system and ensure people actually have access to justice. This is a small but important amendment. We're increasing the jurisdiction of the Disputes Tribunal up to 60,000, so that's the amount that they can look at, and that's going to actually improve the ability for people with disputes to be able to get in front of them. So that's a really important practical thing. It is actually fixing what matters. And the Minister of Justice, supported by the excellent Nicole McKee, the Minister for Courts, is actually addressing our issues around access to justice. We've already seen an improvement in court timeliness, and I know Minister McKee is going to continue to work on that throughout this term, because it is very important. So again, I am very happy to commend this bill. We're fixing what matters, and let's just get on with getting this passed.
Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Casey Costello.
Madam Speaker, I rise on behalf of New Zealand First to speak on the Disputes and Tribunal Amendment Bill, third reading. I think it's worth noting that this is the third reading, as we kind of went down a wrong track with the previous speaker. This is, as has been stated, a very pragmatic and practical step, again an indication of how this government is moving us forward, getting the important tasks done. It is about improving access to justice. New Zealand First firmly believes in upholding fairness and accessibility to the justice system. The bill aligns to our core values of equity and fairness and ensuring that more people can access an appropriate justice mechanism by increasing the threshold to 60,000. There is mechanisms under which the fees can be addressed through existing processes within the justice system, so therefore the bill is very effective and will deliver exactly what it's achieving to do, which is access to justice. I commend the bill to the House.
The question is that the motion be agreed to. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Disputes Tribunal Amendment Bill, third reading.
Sorry, yeah, the ayes have it. So we are on to, sorry, I'm going to call the next item of business. Call on Government Order of the Day, number 4.
Offshore Renewable Energy Bill, second reading. Madam Speaker.
Call the Honourable Matt Ducey. Is there a legislative statement?
What's the bill we're doing?
Point of order.
Can I have the speech?
Is that, yeah.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Aaron Williams. Sorry.
It appears to me that there is no item on the order paper that is ready to be presented. The government is not ready to present the offshore renewable energy bill, and they do not have a legislative statement to present. So my suggestion to you is that it would be appropriate to ring bells, and if in 10 minutes the government is not ready to present that, then this bill should be discharged.
Just a minute. I'm going to take this while because I actually have taken a call. The member stood and. Yes, thank you. But the clock is ticking. The Honourable Matt Ducey.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I present a legislative statement on the offshore renewable energy bill.
That legislative statement is published under the authority of the House and can be found on the Parliament website.
Madam Speaker.
Matt Ducey.
I move that the offshore renewable energy bill be now read a second time. Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity today to talk about the offshore renewable energy bill. I do rise on behalf of my good friend and colleague, the Honourable Simon Watts, Minister for Energy. I think most people would agree with this bill coming in for its second reading that its time has come. This is a bill that is supported by many Kiwis. We do know the support it had for the first reading and then gone through the Select Committee process. And what we do know, Madam Speaker, is that the Select Committee process is an important time for people to have their say. It actually is quite often a time that parties do get together. We've criticised quite a bit that we're not as collaborative or cross-party working on bills like this. So I do want to acknowledge the Select Committee that's worked quite diligently on this bill as it comes back through for the second reading as well. Renewable energy generated offshore, including from offshore wind farms, could support New Zealand to meet its long-term energy needs, ensuring the transition to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And let's be very clear, Madam Speaker, because what we are going to hear from opposition parties is the challenging of the government's position in this space. But let's be very clear, we are committed. We know this is important for Kiwis. We know it's important for New Zealand Inc. And actually, when you think about it, about rebuilding this economy, then it is important that we get our energy sector right and our offshore energy sector right, which can support this government's focus on reducing the cost of living. The Offshore Renewable Energy Bill establishes a legislative regime to govern the construction, the operation and the decommissioning of offshore renewable energy developments. Now, when you look, Madam Speaker, around the main provisions of this bill, And as I said in my introductory comments, I do want to acknowledge the hard work of the Select Committee, who have worked hard on this bill as well. It starts off with a two-stage permitting regime designed to give potential developers greater certainty and to enable the selection of developments that best meet New Zealanders' interests. Because, Madam Speaker, I suppose you would start with the position of why is this bill needed? It delivers on a commitment to put a regulatory regime in place for offshore renewable energy, and that is important. It's part of the government's Electrify New Zealand plan. This is something that we have spoken of not only in government but actually in opposition when we stood on that policy of electrifying New Zealand, and that is the mandate we got in the last election to bring bills like this through the House. International developers are exploring offshore wind projects in New Zealand, and this bill will give them certainty to invest. And what we do know is that when people want to risk their private capital to invest, it is the role of government to give them certainty and clarity, and that's what this bill will give them today. The bill will also enable risk to the Crown and the public from offshore renewable energy, such as decommissioning of infrastructure, to be appropriately managed. So I suppose, Madam Speaker, the next point to raise is what does this bill do? Well, firstly, a feasibility permit gives the holder certainty that no other offshore renewable energy developers will be approved to develop the same site while they undertake feasibility studies. It does this by giving the holder the exclusive ability to apply for an offshore renewable energy commercial permit, as well as the right to apply for relevant environmental consents, resource or marine, in the permit area. It's also about a commercial permit must be obtained before construction begins and provides assurance that the project is ready to progress to construction. It will complement the environmental consents and other approvals required to build and operate offshore renewable energy infrastructure. It also, Madam Speaker, you might be interested to know, limits the ability for developers to land bank certain areas or impede other developments. Permits will also use it or lose it, which I think is important with the provisions, meaning if a project fails to start or progress, the area can be made available to other developers. Madam Speaker, the Minister for Energy will consider commercial permit applications and must have regard to readiness to carry out the proposed development, compliance with requirements in the legislation, and conditions of the applicant's feasibility permit and the applicant's ability to put in place an acceptable financial security arrangement. Very important for this government, Madam Speaker, is the focus on consultation and engagement with relevant Māori groups. Applications for feasibility and commercial permits will be required to consult with relevant Māori groups ahead of submitting their applications. The Minister for Energy must consult with relevant Māori groups before granting any permit, and the provisions in this bill relating to upholding treaty settlements and associated rights and interests align with those in the fast-track approvals legislation. And I must say it was encouraging to hear through the submission process the support for fast-track in thinking about how we deal with offshore renewable energy. Because what we do know, under the last government, the issue was around consents. There was interest, but obviously people were waiting. Well, it was reported publicly 8 years for consents, and that can't be continued with. So that's why this government, quite rightly, is making a change, Madam Speaker. Under decommissioning and financial security, the bill requires all permit holders and owners of related transmission infrastructure to decommission their offshore renewable energy infrastructure at the end of its life. The bill also requires financial security arrangements to be put in place and to maintain to cover the cost to the Crown in the event that the permit holder or infrastructure owner fails to meet their obligation to decommission. When we look at regulation powers, Madam Speaker, the bill includes regulation-making powers to set out procedural and implementation matters, such as additional matters that the Minister must have regard to when determining whether to grant a permit and the provision of information. The powers include the ability to set fees and levies to recover the costs of the regulator. Shortly after the bill is passed, I intend to introduce feasibility permit and cost recovery regulations so that the regime is operational as soon as possible. And that is really the focus, Madam Speaker, from this government, is ensuring that we quite literally are getting things done. And it's great to see the focus here of moving at pace and ensuring that we will operationalise this regime as fast as possible as well. Madam Speaker, just to conclude, the amendments will enable the government to use a new secondary legislation instrument to designate specific marine space where permits could be invited for offshore renewable projects, where there is a pause on granting new permits for seabed mining under the Crown Minerals Act. Madam Speaker, it's a real privilege to take this opportunity to speak on this bill this afternoon. It's a bill that I've been watching through the legislative program, one that I'm very supportive of, and supporting my colleague, the Energy Minister, Simon Watts. I commend this bill to the House.
Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Deborah Russell.
Madam Speaker, as it did at the first reading and as it did during the Select Committee process, the Labour Party supports this bill at the second reading. This is a timely bill, and actually it's a very collaborative one. It builds on work that was underway under the previous government, that was picked up and carried on with by the current government, and it is much needed legislation. So when we talk about the offshore energy bill, the obvious application is in wind farms. Of course, we are experiencing, frankly, an overabundance of wind today. So I just want to recall to the House today that people in Canterbury, people in Kaikoura, people in Tasman Nelson, and now people in Wellington are experiencing some pretty severe wind conditions today. And much as we love the energy that can be generated by wind, there's some pretty terrible stuff going on. So I hope that everyone is staying safe, staying inside, looking after their neighbours as possible, and generally doing all we can to get ourselves through this incredibly windy period today. Madam Speaker, I'm a Taranaki girl, born and bred in Taranaki, from Whangamomina, which, to be fair, is right inland, but mostly grew up in New Plymouth and sometime in Harbour as well, and things like that. There you are, Cameron, Mr Brewer. It's a windy place. We think of Wellington as windy, but something about Taranaki is that the wind offshore is pretty constant. World-class wind, which does make it highly suitable for offshore wind farming. And of course, we also have an abundance of wind onshore in New Zealand. One of the interesting things about offshore wind farming is that there's a fairly constant flow of wind, of air, that the turbines, instead of turning maybe about 40% of the time, which is actually pretty good for land-based wind turbines, about 40% of the time, say in the Ruahine wind farms and things like that. And the offshore wind farms, they can turn pretty much all the time. and so it's a very reliable source of power with offshore wind farms. So it's a source of power that we need to tap into. If we are going to meet our climate commitments, if we are going to start to do our bit to meet the existential threat of climate change, we need to move to renewable energy, and this is an excellent way to do so. So there's very good reason for this support across the House for this particular bill. There are some wrinkles in it that I do think we need to have a bit of a look at, and I know that will be examined quite closely during the committee stage of the House. I want to draw the House's attention to the Select Committee's report and the particular section on managing competing uses. Now, this is quite an important issue that needs to be worked through, has been worked through at the Select Committee. The interesting thing is that sitting in the legislative statement from the Minister is a really interesting bit talking about progressing changes to the bill through an amendment paper. So, and I'm going to direct the House to paragraph number 6 in the legislative statement presented by the Minister, where it said the government actually has announced it has plans to progress changes to the bill through an amendment paper that is intended to address issues raised by submitters and by the Select Committee in relation to competition for space between seabed mining and offshore renewable energy. This is not merely a theoretical concern. We've had in the past year or so a huge push for offshore seabed mining off the south coast of Taranaki. The south coast of Taranaki, that would also be an ideal place for an offshore wind farm. Those two uses are going to be particularly difficult to put together. But here we have reports from October 2024, so about this time a year ago, of wind power firm Blue Float Energy cancelling its plans for wind farms in New Zealand, and the major reason was that an seabed mining firm wanted to mine offshore of the south coast of Taranaki. Those two uses are incompatible. And it's a bit of a frustrating one because, of course, an offshore wind farm is something that is clearly compatible with our climate goals. Seabed mining for iron ores is not necessarily compatible with our climate goals. We actually need to have a think about which of those projects should go ahead in that really incredibly valuable space off the south coast of Taranaki. So I'm pleased to see that the Minister is intending to bring that amendment paper. We'll want to have a really close look at it during the committee stage and work out whether it's going to meet the issues that were raised by submitters during the Select Committee process and the issues that have been raised in this House right from the start. It's also an issue there that I'm sure that Tangata Whenua will want to be sure is examined closely because, again, it's an issue to do with Māori Crown relations there and how resources that belong to the whole country are used. So we'll look forward to that debate at the Committee of the Whole stage. Madam Speaker, there is one other set of issues that I want to raise that around this offshore wind farms and why it is pretty important that we go ahead with them, and particularly around places like Taranaki. Taranaki has called itself the energy province for a long time. I remember as a girl growing up there seeing the lights of the oil drilling rigs offshore, and of course there's still a fair amount of work around fossil fuels that still goes on around Taranaki, and there are wells drilling for it, bringing it up, using it. Now, we are very clear that the use of fossil fuels needs to stop if we are to meet our 2050 climate goals. That'll have to take a transition. But one of the difficulties for us as a Labour Party is the jobs that are associated with that, the jobs that are associated with mining, with oil wells, with those drilling for fossil fuels. There are people who've worked in those industries who've developed really high levels of skill in managing critical equipment, in managing and actually creating the machinery, adapting it to the particular conditions, maintaining it, and they are valuable jobs. Of course, as we move out of using fossil fuels, that means that jobs go as well. And we do need to find viable industries for people to have jobs in that is good, fulfilling, worthwhile work. And it just seems to me that the offshore wind industry is one of those areas where people can work, where there are jobs to be had, where they are trade jobs, they are jobs where our sparkies can be employed, our engineers can be employed, where workers of all sorts can have work to do that actually really contributes to the country and that is well paid and that gives people that sense of standing, the sense that when they get up and go to work in the morning, they are doing a job that is worth doing. So as we move away from using fossil fuels, as we move and transition through to a green and renewable economy, this is one of the tasks we must engage in, ensuring that people continue to have good and meaningful work. Offshore wind farms seem like an ideal place for that kind of work that keeps people employed and that actually generates good for New Zealand. It is part of the work we must do to become an energy independent nation. And that's a great goal for us to have. Why? Because we do not want to be dependent on overseas fuel suppliers. We actually want to have our own energy independence here in New Zealand. So, Madam Speaker, for a whole variety of reasons, we support this bill. We support this bill because it has been a collaborative effort from beginning in the last government, continuing through into this government. We support this work because it supports our climate goals. We support this work because it will create jobs for people. Madam Speaker, this is a good bill. There's stuff we still need to iron out, stuff we want to see at the Committee of the Whole House stage, but Labor is proud to stand in support of this bill today.
The question is that the motion be agreed to.
Thank you.
Scott Willis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is my pleasure to talk to the Offshore Renewables Bill, and as you might expect, the Green Party does support renewables. We do have some things to say about this bill, however. Given that the government is promoting fast track as the solution to everything, and we've seen what happened with fast track, with Trans-Tasman resources being written into the legislation and Blue Float floating away, because it is time that we focused on the renewable transition we want, rather than simply seeking to extract more minerals and destroy our reputation internationally. Therefore, oh, that's an interesting comment. You can't build wind turbines without minerals. Actually, there is so much potential. We see in Scandinavia wooden wind turbine towers. We see so much circularity in wind now. But I am surprised that
point of order, Simon Court.
Madam Speaker, I just need to check. Is the date the 20? What is it? Is it 2025 or 1825?
Are you trifling with the House, Mr. Court?
Point of order.
I did not accept the point of order. He was trifling with the House. Mr. Willis, please continue.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And we are used to the trivial nature of the government. However, this is a serious matter. It's a serious matter that does merit consideration, and I appreciated being able to sit through the submissions at Select Committee. We heard concerns from iwi and hapu about the need to be engaged, the need to be consulted, the need to be participating in the offshore renewable transition that we're seeing. And we heard the concerns about Trans-Tasman resources very strongly. What I would have loved to have done was spend some time in the Cabinet when this bill was being discussed, actually, because I wonder what the Honourable Shane Jones was how he was able to manage the restrictions we require on extraction to enable the renewables, the offshore renewables transition. Madam Speaker, this bill is something we will support because we want to see renewables powering our nation. We want to see our nation fully powered by renewables, not simply our electricity system, our whole energy system. We want to see our mobility powered by renewables. We want to see the end to the deindustrialisation that is underway. We want to see our industry and our manufacturing supported by renewable electricity. In that sense, we certainly will support this bill. What we saw and what we heard through submissions were the need for hapu and iwi to be involved, and we're pleased to see some strengthening. It's not all the way we would have liked, but it is some strengthening for participation in the bill. We've also heard that there are real risks. Even though we've got some controls, there are still risks if there are multiple uses in that area, and these risks don't magically disappear when we limit some things, because if we've got large boats that are seeking to operate in the area, we have risks to big bits of kit, to our wind turbines. So we're not wholeheartedly pleased with where this has got to, but there are definitely benefits there. The most important issue, I think, was that we do need to make sure that iwi and hapu are more involved in what happens in the marine environment. This was the most prominent issue that came up through submissions, and I'm not convinced that we have got there yet with this bill. I think we will need to improve it when we take government in 2026. But at least this gives us something to work on. And as my colleague from Labour talked about, this is something that we have worked on collectively across the House through the previous government to this government, and we will keep working on it in the next government as well. So we have a focus to make sure not only that we build the renewables we need, but that we involve the communities that are affected in those buildings. And this is where we take issue with Fast Track, because what Fast Track is doing is cutting out the community voices, cutting out iwi and hapu voices, and that is problematic. That is why we have taken a position on Fast Track that will ensure that we revoke those consents that we don't deem consistent with community interest, with our climate interest. Madam Chair, I also want to address Madam Speaker, I also want to address the Natural and Built Environment Act, the Fast Track legislation, the enabling legislation, not just the offshore renewables legislation, but the lack of legislation for renewables onshore as well, because we had a promise from this government that by June 2024, we would have a national policy statement for renewable electricity generation. That still has not been delivered. We had a promise that we would have national environmental standards. That still has not been delivered. So while it is good to get this bit of legislation through, we're seeing a real problem with the rest of the renewables transition, the faster, quicker, easier renewables transition, which is onshore, and we don't have the legislation that was promised back last year. We are still waiting. And I particularly take issue with this because in my pre-parliamentary days, I have worked on renewables. There was the Board of Inquiry into the Renewable Electricity Generation National Policy Statement for Renewable Electricity Generation in 2010. It was gazetted and implemented in 2011. Since then, numerous reviews of the National Policy Statement for Renewable Electricity Generation have made it really clear that it has had no impact whatsoever in enabling renewable electricity generation through the RMA. It's made no difference whatsoever. And there have been attempts to replace it because it was, I believe, the first national policy statement. There have been attempts to replace it, but they have not been completed. And this is what we're seeing here. We've got one little bit of legislation that has taken quite some time beyond December 2024 that was going to be delivered, and now we still do not have the national policy statement for renewable electricity generation. We're still waiting. This is really problematic because we've been told that this government wants to double or triple renewable electricity generation, and yet it can't deliver on time the legislation we need to meet that target. That's the problem. Got to get it right. Got to get it right. That would be a good thing if only this government did not rush legislation and get it wrong so often. So if they took the time to do the work instead of trying to fast track things and causing social disruption, the government could choose to do things right and deliver what they promise. Unfortunately, they fail to deliver far too often. We will support this bill. We're pleased that it has got here finally, but we also want to see the national policy statement for renewable electricity generation delivered with national environmental standards so that we can fast track onshore wind and solar, so that we can build the renewable nation that we could be if we had a government that knew what it was doing. And this is really, really important because at the moment the $10 billion per annum of fossil fuels we import costs everybody, costs every household heavily at a cost of living crisis. And that $10 billion we can wipe off the slate by generating our own electricity here, by powering our households, our industry, our businesses, our mobility with the electrons we generate onshore and offshore here in Aotearoa. So, Madam Speaker, we will support this bill. We do not feel as though all our concerns have been
Members'
addressed.
Time has expired.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Simon Court.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On a day when Wellington reminds us how much power the wind has, it's fitting that we advance this bill to turn energy into jobs, investment and reliable electricity for New Zealanders. ACT supports this bill wholeheartedly at second reading. The Select Committee's work has produced a clearer, faster, investor-grade regime, putting flexibility first, commercial second, transparent decisions, obligations to decommission, of course, and engagement with iwi and hapu important too, and of course the ability to manage the safety and coexistence at sea of different types of activities. This bill fixes what matters, provides certainty over ambiguity, pace over drift, and above all, accountability over open-ended process. This bill's not about slogans, it's about unlocking billions in private capital and safeguarding the marine environment and other users. Over the mid to long term, offshore renewables, especially offshore wind, will complement hydro, geothermal, solar, and the growing contribution from utility scale or rooftop solar. Together, these resources can lift supply, they can sharpen competition, and help keep power affordable for Kiwi households and businesses. But we should also be honest, variable renewables actually need a reliable, firm supply so that they can do their part of the heavy lifting. For the foreseeable future, not just as a temporary measure, New Zealand will need flexible thermal generation powered by gas and, yes, of course, that reliable, trusty black nugget coal. We need to keep the lights on when the wind is low and the sun doesn't shine. And maybe the rain doesn't show up either. And that's why we'll always need thermal. In fact, proponents of renewable projects have told me, and I know they will have told other members of this House and the government, that without reliable thermal firming, the type of renewable energy projects like offshore wind simply won't get off the ground, because those developers cannot sell offshore wind or any other type of renewable to their customers unless they have an insurance policy and thermal firming to back it up. Now, the committee engaged seriously with the challenge of competing uses in the marine environment, because investors simply won't commit to a project if they feel that their need to use a space can be undermined by somebody else coming along and getting a consent after they've already started planning. It's important that we make space for different types of activities, and that's why this bill does provide space for offshore wind projects, but also recognises that we do need to get those critical minerals from places like the seabed offshore Taranaki that the former Speaker from the Green Party was so concerned about. While he proposes you can build wind turbines with sticks and bits of wood, I tell you what, the wind turbines coming out of North America, Europe and China right now are made out of critical minerals. They're made out of epoxy resins made from oil and gas and coal. You cannot deliver renewable energy without the minerals that go into manufacturing these components. So look, I just suggest just to reflect back on something we often hear from the Greens, educate yourself, Greenies, because you can't have one without the other. Now, we should also learn from Australia, particularly our cousins in Victoria, where declared areas for offshore renewables and transparent milestones give developers clarity and give communities confidence about what's coming next. New Zealand must be at least as bankable as our neighbours in Australia, because developers will judge whether to invest in Australia if it's easier or New Zealand if it's easier. And they certainly won't come and invest in New Zealand if we make the playing field too hard to play on. Passing the bill is necessary but not sufficient. And the previous Speaker from the Green Party alluded to the fact that this government is getting on with fixing what matters in terms of a national policy statement for renewable energy generation and for electricity networks. We've consulted on those in the past few months, and I would have expected that member to know that, and if he was really involved, to actually have made a submission on what should be in those national policy statements. I understand that the Minister for Resource Management Reform, Chris Bishop, will have more to say about the results of that consultation in the near future, and I'm sure it will address many of the concerns that the Green Party member had, no matter how misinformed. As I said, passing the bill is necessary, but it's not sufficient. The next action, and consistent with my delegation from the Minister for Resource Management Reform, is to deliver an environmental management framework for offshore wind that provides a clear and reasonable consenting pathway across the coastal and marine area. Applicants need to know up front what standards apply, how environmental effects will be managed, for example, on marine mammals, on the sea floor, and how long decisions will take. Because if we get that right, we move from talk to turbines, from potential to actual projects. We also need smart coordination on the shore side. So I do agree with that member from the Green Party that transmission planning and making sure we've got the resource management system coordinated is really important, so we keep pace with new generation as it comes on stream. Ports capable of handling the large components, the wind turbines, the towers and the bases, and training pathways so that New Zealanders can take the jobs this industry creates. Because unlike the wishful thinking of the Labour Party, since just announcing a just transition, cancelling an entire industry like offshore oil and gas exploration is like giving people a pink slip and a pat on the head wish you well. This government does not agree with that approach. We believe in making sure that people have the skills and are supported to take a role in this industry. So when consenting, when infrastructure and when skills and jobs align, costs fall, timelines shorten and confidence grows. That is what this government is all about. That is what fixing what matters looks like. Targeted reforms that reduce uncertainty, that reward progress, protect the environment and make private investment do the heavy lifting. And that's why ACT is trusted with important work streams in this government. We focus on outcomes, rules that are clear, from the giggling Gertie over there, decisions that are timely and responsibilities that are enforced. That's what this government is doing. That's what ACT's role in this government is to do, again through the resource management reforms that complement offshore wind. So on this very windy Wellington day, let's harness what we've already got. Let's pass the bill, let's deliver the environmental framework next and show that New Zealand can welcome offshore renewables on the same terms and conditions as Victoria, Australia, as Europe and the United States. ACT supports this bill. Let's fix what matters, secure reliable energy. Let's get on with it.
Speaker.
Jamie Abakel.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise on behalf of New Zealand First to support the offshore renewable energy bill in its second reading. And as the previous speaker has alluded to, we're not having a lack of wind across the country today, but probably the wind that we are all experiencing across the country is something that we don't want to see at the levels they are at the moment. But also the previous speaker also spoke about how this bill can create jobs, investment, and another important part is around energy security. I do want to highlight the Select Committee, the Transport and Infrastructure Committee that's chaired by Andy Foster and the work that they've done on the bill. I had the opportunity in the first reading to take our first reading speech on this as well, and there has been a number of changes on the bill and amendments, and I'm sure that there will be further amendments through the Committee of the Whole, but it's good to see the work that's been done from the Chair and the committee members. Just as I alluded to in that first reading speech, a number of us, I guess it's almost all of us in this House at some point in time, we get to see the opportunities across the country. I've had the opportunity to go to Taranaki and talk to some of these companies that are looking at setting up these wind turbines. I also had the opportunity this year actually to travel to Taiwan, where they've actually got some of these already up and running, and it was obviously seeing these structures and how big they are, Madam Speaker, till you actually get a presence of the size of these turbines that we're actually talking about and the planning that needs to go into them. It's not just the rules and the regulatory regime that needs to be set up, but just the logistics of setting one of these up in the different ports. I know they were talking to me about having to use where the construction sites and how they would actually even piece them all together was quite a puzzle. The fast track bill, Madam Speaker, I do want to speak about that, as we hear often in the House about the fast track bill, and at the moment I think there's 22 renewable projects in the fast track bill. Some of them are the hydro opportunities, some of them are solar, but some of them are the wind opportunities. And it is disappointing, as we've gone through fast track, that the opposition parties have not realised the potential to actually get some runs on the board, especially in the renewable space. And we often hear now, we're hearing that some of these things are consented from the other side, but we're actually trying to create certainty. And when we come to renewable energy, you would think across the House we could come to a bipartisan situation where we go, yes, we can see the potential here and fast track and actually take away the red tape and the rules around this stuff and actually get some runs on the board, Madam Speaker. So fast track, it's great to see that these projects are included and actually let's see some of these getting developed. Through this act, we see that it's a two-stage permitting regime. It's the feasibility first. We hear also on my site visit and just discussing with these potential companies that they need to have the feasibility opportunity and then going into some commercial permits after that. So that to me is very, very sensible. And I do just really want to say how important it is to see these projects now and developed, and I think across the House we should just be celebrating the fact that we're actually getting some of this work done. So the bill does see that this will enhance the clarity around the legislation. It does give some flexibility, and again, because it's a pretty new concept here in New Zealand, we're going to have some flexibility, some understanding as we get these underway. But importantly, we need investor confidence, and I think the previous speaker again touched on that with the oil and gas ban. We don't want to see people rising in this House saying, hey, maybe through fast track this will be consented, but we're actually going to have another look and maybe we're going to decline it further down the track. And that, Madam Speaker, isn't going to give confidence to renewable energy, just as it has in other sectors. When people say things like that, oh, maybe further down the track we'll re-look at this and decline things, that won't give confidence to investors to come here and invest. I do highlight, and we have heard across the House, the competing interests. And there is obviously things like seabed mining and wanting to use the same kind of areas as the offshore wind, and I think that's an important issue to discuss. And I think, Madam Speaker, you could look at it something like spatial planning, and in the RMA we look at spatial planning on the land. Maybe here we need the spatial planning in the sea, so it's that same kind of concept. Another really important part as well is the decommissioning of these this infrastructure. As great as it will be to get the infrastructure in, there will be a time and place to actually have to have these decommissioned and actually to have a plan in place for that. So, Madam Speaker, this is about future-proofing energy security and infrastructure, and on that I commend the bill to the House.
Francisco Hernandez.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of this legislation, and in the spirit of the cross-party committee which has gripped the House in supporting the passage of this bill, I'll highlight one thing from each previous speaker that I do agree with, starting with the member Deborah Russell, when she pointed out that it was good to see the government continue the framework that has been set upon by the previous Labour government. And I say Labour government deliberately because, sometimes speakers across the House call it a Labour Green government, but actually there's never been a Labour Green government. There's been a Labour... The first term of the Labour government was a New Zealand First coalition government with supply and confidence from the Green Party. The second term of the Labour government was a Labour majority government with a cooperation agreement with the Green Party. No, it's not to distance with it, it's just to factually outline the things that have happened. And then there was the contribution from the member Scott Willis. Of course, like the government members, I have to say I agree with everything that Willis says, so I agree with everything that the Willis on our side says. And then the member Simon Court said that we should look to Australia for our energy policy and our wider policy settings. And look, I do agree with aspects of what he said. Australia has set a very aggressive and impressive emissions reduction target of 62 to 70%. And if you contrast that with New Zealand of 51 to 55% by 2035, I do think there are things we can learn from in that regard. The member, Simon Court, also said that ACT exercised disproportionate influence in this government and was trusted with important jobs. And we certainly agree with them in that regard, that they've definitely exercised disproportionate influence. If you look at the things like the Regulatory Standards Bill, if you look at the Treaty Principles Bill, if you look at charter schools, if you look at all sorts of legislation, we definitely agree with them that ACT has definitely been a powerful and driving influence on this government. So we agree with them on that regard. Oh, ACT in New Zealand first. Yes, definitely. And then I'll turn to the contribution by the member Jamie Arbuckle, because he said that it was important to have a security of energy policy and ensure a stable transition between different energy policies across different types of government. And look, that's why we've called on them to not reverse the oil and gas ban, because that's one of the things we need to do is we need to give confidence to people who want to invest in New Zealand. And I do believe we are giving them confidence in the House today, because the House is sending a very strong signal that you should invest in offshore renewable, that you should invest in renewable energy policy, because that is something that every single political party in this House does agree on. And the message is invest in renewable. What we don't want them to, the government parties to do is to give false hope to people who might want to invest in the sunset oil and gas industries, because that is something that we in opposition have taken a united stance on and saying no more investments in that regard. So, in that regard, we do want to give policy certainty, and that policy certainty we do want to give, which is partly being granted through this bill, is for investors to come to New Zealand, invest in offshore renewable energy, and invest in renewable energy in general, and do not invest in the declining sunset fossil gas industry, because that's not something that's going to be continued and supported across the next government. Now, I want to turn to something that while we do support this legislation, we do feel that this is one step forward and 10 steps back in the context of the wider energy policy taken by this government. There's certainly been some positive initiatives like this one, like the wood and biogas energy strategy that was announced either yesterday or a couple of days ago. But that has to be contrasted with the wider cuts and what has been taken away in terms of clean energy policy. One of the things that they took away when they first came into office was, the decarbonising industry fund, which was a really important component. They took away clean energy subsidies, which was also another part of the transition to a clean energy policy. So while we do welcome that as one step, this as one step forward, we do decry the 10 steps backward that this government has taken on energy policy.
Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Simon Watts.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. This bill delivers on our government's commitments to put a regulatory regime in place for offshore renewable energy as part of this government's Electrify New Zealand plan. And Madam Speaker, if you let me just provide a little bit of an update. Obviously, this morning the country has seen a significant impact on our electricity network, in particular at the top of the South Island, with the top of the South and the West Coast losing power. I'm glad to report, Madam Speaker, and you may be interested in this, that Reefton is now back on, and all substations are also back on across the top of the South and the West Coast. I want to recognise those staff who are out there in these conditions providing repairs to our network and acknowledge their work. This bill today is not merely administrative, it is a measure to unlock a significant new source of clean power for our economy. Offshore renewable energy has the potential to help grow our economy, powered by clean energy, and reach New Zealand's target of net zero carbon emissions by 2050. International developers are exploring offshore wind projects in New Zealand, and the bill will give them greater certainty to invest, as well as allowing them and the government to select the developments that best meet our national interests. The bill also enables risks to the Crown and the public from offshore renewable energy, such as decommissioning of infrastructure, to be appropriately managed. I want to use the time that I've got to run through a few of the key features of the bill and feedback that we've received during the Select Committee process. The bill introduces a requirement for all forms of commercial offshore renewable energy infrastructure to obtain 2 permits, a feasibility permit and a commercial permit. The feasibility permit, Madam Speaker, grants the holder exclusive rights for a specified site for a defined period. This exclusivity is vital. It provides a secure window for developers to undertake the complexity and costly feasibility studies and apply for the necessary environmental consents. It does this by giving the holder the exclusive ability to apply for an offshore renewable energy commercial permit, as well as the right to apply for relevant environmental, resource or marine permits in that area. Feasibility permit applications will be assessed on a comparative basis and awarded to the projects that are most likely to deliver benefits to New Zealand. Secondly, a commercial permit must be obtained before construction begins. This permit provides assurance that the project is ready to progress to construction. And that process incorporates the necessary function that limits the ability for developers to land bank certain areas or to impede other developments. Permits will have a use it or lose it provision, meaning that if a project fails to start or progress, the area can be made available to other developers. And I think that's pretty sensible, Madam Speaker. The bill requires all permit holders and owners of related transmission infrastructure to decommission their offshore renewable energy infrastructure at the end of their life. The bill also requires financial security arrangements to be put in place and maintained to cover the cost to the Crown in the event that the permit holders or infrastructure owners fails to meet their obligations to decommissions. And this is, of course, as we will all know, consistent with the standard practice internationally. New Zealand has implemented similar mechanisms for oil and gas in 2021 through amendments to the Crown Minerals Act 1991. Other protections in the bill, of course, include the ability to have safety zones to protect the infrastructure and people from intentional or accidental harm. The bill enables safety zones of up to 500 metres to be established around offshore renewable generation infrastructure and substations, and this will prohibit unauthorised people or vessels from entering or undertaking certain activity in that area. The bill enables the administration, monitoring and enforcement of this regime and is intended that the Ministry for Business, Innovation and Employment undertake that role. The bill empowers enforcement officers and safety zone officers to undertake a wide range of compliance and enforcement activities. Mr. Speaker, the bill also includes a range of offences and penalties for breaches of the regime, from $3,000 to $10 million in fines through a permit revocation or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 2 years. Significant fines and penalties were considered necessary in certain instances to provide an effective deterrent given the financial capability likely to permit holders. The bill includes regulation-making powers to set out procedural and implementation matters, such as additional matters that the Minister must have regard to when determining whether to grant a permit and the provision of information. The powers include the ability to set fees, levies and to recover the costs to the regulator. Shortly after the bill is passed, Mr. Speaker, I will intend to introduce feasibility permit and cost recovery regulations so that the regime is operational as soon as practical. This bill was transferred to the Transport and Infrastructure Committee in December last year. The committee received 71 written submissions and 21 oral submissions. I want to thank those who submitted for their interest and their constructive contributions. I also want to thank my parliamentary colleagues, many of which are here today, for their help and consideration in these matters. The committee recommended changes, greater flexibility for determining financial securities related to decommissioning, removing the cap on the total duration of commercial permit, and of course, Mr. Speaker, defining the type of projects that are not covered by the legislation, such as research and demonstration projects. These changes will improve the workability of the bill and increase certainty for developers. A key recommendation from the Select Committee concerned the issue of competition for space between offshore renewable energy and seabed mining. To provide necessary investment certainty for both sectors, Cabinet has agreed to an amendment that will allow the government to use a new secondary legislation instrument to designate specific marine space where permits for offshore renewable projects can be invited. This action would occur while a pause remains granted for new seabed mining permits under the Crown Minerals Act in the designated area. Mr. Speaker, this measure will create clear pathways for development, ensuring that our offshore wind potential can be realised without undue regulatory friction. In the amendment paper, which is currently being drafted, this will be debated during the Committee of the Whole phase. Mr. Speaker, we have covered the main features of this bill, and I want to conclude by refocusing the House on the true opportunities that this bill unlocks. This bill does more than set up a regime for offshore renewable energy and creates an economy that is going to be powered by clean energy. It is a catalyst for high-value job creation across the country and particularly in our regions. The billions in private investment this framework attracts will translate directly to demand for engineers, specialised marine technicians and other high-value jobs. By providing a clear, robust and certain regulatory foundation, this bill, Mr. Speaker, guarantees that New Zealand is ready to capture this massive economic opportunity. And with that, I therefore commend this bill to the House.
Glenn Bennett. Kia ora, Mr. Speaker, and as I rise to take a call on this piece of legislation, I reflect on often how this House is slow and often is playing catch up. And I mean, I'm not targeting anyone on this because I think it's successive governments have dropped the ball or haven't actually been ahead of the ball, and so we're here and we support this legislation, but it's probably something we should have been considering 20 years ago. It's probably something we should have been considering at the start of the new millennium in terms of what we need to be doing to ensure that we burn no more fossil fuels, that we stop extracting those from the earth, that we find ways to ensure that we meet our Paris climate targets, to make sure that we're doing what's right for future generations so we can look them in the eyes and say we did what was right for you. But we didn't, and that's on all of us and previous governments to consider. But we're here and we're making some movements and it is the right thing. Mr. Speaker, as I look and read parts of the legislation and obviously the impact it has specifically for us who are in Taranaki, and it impacts our people, it impacts our environment, and it also impacts our climate. And as we went through the process in previous years around looking at decarbonisation, as we worked on the process around looking at Taranaki 2050 and what it could be, a future beyond oil and gas, this definitely has been front and centre in terms of offshore renewable wind or renewable energy and what it could be and what it should be and how do we get the regulations right. And I just have a few comments to make because we're happy to support it and move on, but it is to reflect on the fact that there are several, as was said by my colleague earlier, the Honourable Deborah Russell, there are several organisations and businesses that have been working on business cases, on studies on what this could be in terms of renewable wind offshore. And of course we've had Blue Float who was there, who was in the mix and have pulled out, have moved on because of the challenges of getting regime and getting the settings right, because obviously as a business case you need certainty to make sure that your business case stacks up. But we also have others that are hanging around. We also have Wind Quarry, Zealandia, I think they're called, who I remember meeting with a number of years ago, who have been looking at the possibility of work off the coast of Taranaki. Also the Taranaki Offshore Partners, which brings in the New Zealand Super Fund and Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners, who are still looking at what could be done. And so this piece of legislation as it makes its way through this House, is part of setting out and laying out certainty, not only for the ocean floor, but also for the marine life, for, like I say, the people, the workers, and the economy of Taranaki and of New Zealand. And as has been said by many people this morning, the fact that we are in a position where we need to invest heavily in what should be offshore and any kind of renewable energy to make our country not only more affordable, but the greenest country in the world. My other point I want to make is around decommissioning, because I made sure I flicked through and tried to understand what this legislation was doing around decommissioning, because that has been a huge bone of contention for us in Taranaki in terms of the Tui oil field back several years ago, but it also has been an issue for this Parliament or for the government of the time, and it was just under $450 million of taxpayers' money that was spent in terms of the decommissioning. Tamarind had abandoned the field and had gone back to their home overseas and had left the uncertainty and the potential environmental disaster of what could have been if the government of the day didn't step in, didn't front up with the money, with taxpayers' money, for the decommissioning process to ensure it was sealed correctly, to ensure there was no potential environmental issues. And we don't want that to happen again, because we know that the purse strings and the Treasury are tight. We know that we need to be investing money in clean energy, into things like health, into homes, into making sure that we have good jobs. And so when the government had to spend $450 million because a private firm has just abandoned and gone off back home across the ocean, then we need to make sure that doesn't happen again. So looking at what this legislation does, the obligations regarding decommissioning and financial security to ensure the permit holders and owners of those affected places and the decommissioning is done and they are liable for it, which we need to make sure, and during the committee stage I'm sure we'll be asking a lot of questions to make sure we get that right, because we don't want another Tui oil field debacle. We don't want another rookie business riding into New Zealand, doing their thing, abandoning, and then the government and us taxpayers having to fit the bill. The other one, just finally, Mr. Speaker, is around the purchasing of permits and what that looks like. And we need to reflect on that because we don't want this legislation to be enabling for someone to be able to buy a patch of ocean floor, hold on to it, invest not in infrastructure, not in building any wind turbines, but sitting on it to be able to sell in the future and to make a profit, and there's nothing to actually be done. So we need to make sure in terms of how that looks when it comes to offshore renewable energy that we get that right. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I just want to mention the benefits of offshore renewable energy. And looking around the world, I think there's a real challenge because of fast track and because of seabed mining and the uncertainty that creates, and it's dangerous and it's potentially a huge issue for us in Taranaki, but more than that for our environment, for our ocean floor, but also for our marine life and what is there. And I've looked around the world at several offshore wind farms, and in fact, where they actually enhance the ecosystem of an ocean bed, where they actually there's artificial reefs, and there's been even I forget what they call it, but it's padding that when they're drilling the holes to put the wind turbines in, they have cushions around to protect the different sea life from the vibrations and what it actually does in terms of the regeneration and the bringing back to life what is there and what should have been there. So, Mr. Speaker, I think we need to take this into the committee stage and ask some serious questions to make sure that it is fit for purpose, to make sure the decommissioning regime is set up to protect us as taxpayers, but also to protect the environment and to protect our workers. Mr. Speaker, we support this legislation and we look forward to it heading into the committee stage.
Dan Bidwell. Mr. Speaker, well, this is a good bill, but you wouldn't get that necessarily from listening to the previous member's speech. He brought up so many ifs, buts, whats, questions that it made you question whether this is a good bill. But it is a good bill, and it's a good bill for Taranaki, isn't it, the MP for Taranaki? It's a good bill for New Zealand. This is a bill that is about saying yes, Mr. Speaker, yes to jobs, yes to economic growth, yes to foreign investment, yes to energy security, and yes to meeting our climate commitments. Mr. Speaker, it's been a pleasure to be part of this bill as a member of the Transport and Infrastructure Select Committee. We had a lot of submissions on this, and what was really fantastic was seeing the amount of foreign investors that were coming to the table and saying, here's what we need to unleash this sector in New Zealand. And I'm really impressed and proud of the fact that there is a lot of foreign investment that wishes to come to New Zealand, invest in regions like the Great Taranaki region, and to power this sector up for the future. But there are a number of things that we made in Select Committee based on the feedback that we had from these foreign investors. And we've heard it today, Mr. Speaker. These foreign investors need certainty, and they need to make sure the economics can work, because this is a tough sector to actually make viable for commercial businesses in terms of setting up the infrastructure, setting up the pipeline that's required to connect to the grid, and then making sure the commercials actually work. So we did make a number of changes to the bill around the feasibility permits, changing the permitting regime, making sure that the decommissioning obligations were clarified, excluding, being clear about what infrastructure is excluded as part of the feasibility and commissioning regime, and also dealing with the competing ore applications and how that was to be addressed. But there is, I think, substantial opportunity for New Zealand in this area. I'm looking forward to getting this bill passed as quickly as possible. We know that there is going to be some amendments in the committee stage that deals with the new secondary legislation instrument, and the Minister, Simon Watts, has outlined that today. So this is a great day for energy security, jobs, the economy, and I commend this bill to the House.
Point of order, Honourable Matt Ducey.
I seek leave for the House to consider the second reading of the Mental Health Bill if the House concludes consideration of the Offshore Renewable Energy Bill before 1 p.m. today. I note the opposition spokesperson for mental health will be here to consider that, seeking leave.
Just you're seeking leave. Leave is sought for that purpose. Is there an objection? Yes. There is objection.
Mr. Speaker?
The Right Honourable Adrian Rafi.
Tēnā koe te maunga te whare. On a day that Tāwhiri Mātea is reminding us of his strength and power, I find myself speaking to the Offshore Renewable Energy Bill. And I had the privilege of attending a hui in Taranaki about 3 or 4 years ago, along with the then Minister, the Honourable Megan Woods, who met with iwi about this very issue. And I wanted to let some of the members opposite, whose characterisation of our position on this side of the House is not entirely accurate. We were early starters on this issue, and it's taken a long while to get to, for this current government to get to this day. It was already in train when we were in government. I can tell the member, Mr. Court, perhaps as he casts his eyes towards Australia, he can wave the Taranaki workforce goodbye, because in that time that's what's happened. So we need to do definitely need to do this. Taranaki iwi want to be active participants in this issue. And my advice to any overseas investor that wants to come here, that you beat a path to all stakeholders in Taranaki and make sure that those relationships are strong and that they are active in allowing that investment to move forward. Failure to do so would be a mistake. And actually, it should not be a tick box exercise through this legislation. So we will be looking closely at it at the Committee of the Whole stage to make sure that we have the best piece of legislation that we can have. There are many communities who will be relying on us getting this right. So, Mr. Speaker, that's my brief contribution to this bill.
Cameron Brewer.
Oh, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, and it's great to rise in support of the offshore renewable energy bill. It's certainly good news for my home province of Taranaki, South Taranaki, to be more specific. And it's also good news for the New Zealand Super Fund, the guardians of the New Zealand Super Fund, which of course have in their guardianship over $85 billion. And of course, the Super Fund is looking at an investment in offshore wind farms, which is well exercised and well underway, as a previous speaker said, with the Copenhagen infrastructure partners. And that will pursue the development of a significant large-scale offshore wind farms in the South Taranaki Bight. And so the guardians of the NZ Super Fund are very excited about this, and they will be pleased that this is progressing through Select Committee. Incidentally, Mr. Chair, the guardians of the Super Fund have also announced that they are looking at other investment opportunities, of course, particularly in infrastructure and particularly pertaining to roads. But I digress. As others have said, Mr. Speaker, this gives greater certainty for developers to invest in offshore renewable energy developments. So it's unlocking that offshore investment, which is fantastic. It also manages the risks to the Crown and the public from offshore renewable developments, energy developments. And so, look, we are committed to this, the National Party, Mr. Speaker, as part of our Electrify New Zealand, which of course is all about the goal of doubling renewable energy generation by 2050. We are now delivering. New Zealand has not currently got a regulatory regime for offshore renewable energy, and so we are progressing this legislation to fix that and to enable this new form of energy generation. Again, establishing this regime is an important step to giving those investors the confidence needed, the huge billions of dollars worth of confidence needed to construct such assets to help New Zealand's increasingly electrified economy. And of course, despite what the opposition may tell you on the black and white tiles, we are committed, Nationals committed, this government is committed to meeting New Zealand's long-term energy needs, and hence why you're hearing a lot about the energy sector coming from this government, and that includes Mr. Speaker, that includes transitioning to net zero carbon emissions by 2050. I commend the bill.
Ingrid Leary.
I'm really pleased that the House had the opportunity to hear from my colleague, the Right Honourable Adrian Rudolphy, to correct the record really that this is a piece of work that Labor started because of our commitment to unlocking the potential for renewables, and it has been picked up by this government, which we're really happy about. I won't repeat all the comments made by previous members. I think we've got the message loud and clear that this is a pretty good bill, apart from to put into context the importance of the Taranaki wind farm developments, because what it will do with that offshore wind project is generate up to 1 gigawatt of electricity, and that's equal to 1 billion watts. So what that means is it's equal to some of our largest hydro stations and more than 8 Hauraki wind farms combined. Harapaki wind farms combined. And the developers have said that it is really good in terms of bringing confidence back into the sector. So what matters for Taranaki matters for the rest of the country. It means keeping the lights on in Auckland. It'll be jobs and growth in regional New Zealand, and as has been said, it will help meet our net zero climate goals, although we do have some cynicism about that given everything else that's going on. I think it is important to note also the parts of the legislation and the regime in particular that Labor will be watching really closely to ensure that this can do what it says on the tin. And that is around clarifying how maritime space conflicts will be managed in terms of mining and aquaculture. It's about strengthening environmental compliance obligations under EEZ and RMA frameworks, and as my colleague, the Right Honourable Adrian has said, enhancing Treaty of Waitangi recognition and Māori engagement. That is going to be critical, and we will be keeping a close eye on that, given that sometimes we see one side of the ledger enhanced and enabled under Christopher Luxon's government without the surrounding protections and safeguards to ensure that the transition can happen. We are also going to ensure that that there should be ministerial oversight or guidance for setting decommissioning and financial security requirements, and we want to see improved information requirements and transparency for permit applications and ownership changes. So a lot of that stuff is the devil in the detail of the regime. They are caveats. However, as we have heard today in the House, it's a good piece of work started by Labor, picked up by this government, and we do support what is happening in the House today. I commend the bill.
Mr Speaker.
David McLeod.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm very pleased to stand in support of this bill, as everybody else around the House has as well. I just thought I'd mention it's rather ironic with all the wind we have outside at the moment that a lot of the turbines would not be actually able to operate because they turn off at 90 kilometres an hour or thereabouts, and I think there's been some wind speeds in excess of 200 kilometres an hour in the South Island today, so it shows you how excessive the wind actually is. This is, as already been spoken to, is very important for Taranaki, and I've got to support what Adrian Rurawhi has actually said over the engagement with Māori. It's critically important that at the earliest possible moment, proposals such as these start with conversations with iwi. It's a strong start, and it's one that I strongly encourage as well. The actual size of this, as the member has just spoken, it's talked up to maybe even up to 2 gigawatts of generation capability here. Now, if we think about the current installed generating capacity of all the wind turbines in New Zealand at the moment just being north of 1 gigawatt, this one farm can be actually immense, huge in fact. And one of the challenges of it is actually when you bring that amount of electricity into the supply stream, what effect that actually has. We spoke about the fact that Lake Onslow, one of the potential perverse outcomes of that was it actually nullifying the potential interests of having other electricity generation occur. Well, this wind farm opportunity potentially has an effect similar to that in some ways in itself. The size of these farms is immense. We spoke about the fact that one of these generators, I think it was Jamie Arbuckle mentioned that he viewed it overseas in Taiwan. Well, some of the proposals have been put forward. One generator, the size of the tower, is similar to the size of the Sky Tower. They are immense structures. One generator on top of one of these wind turbine generators is potentially up to 3 times bigger than the land wind generators. That's how big these structures are. The distance between these wind generators can be up to 2 kilometres apart. That's how big the actual span of each of the blades' diameters are, and for them not to be disturbing each other with the wind flow, etc. The South Taranaki Bight is a very attractive area, not just because of the wind, the world-class wind that they have there, but also the immense amount of area with low draft or low depth of water. So they need to install the pile-driven turbines in drafts less than 60 metres deep. And the South Taranaki Bight happens to have an immense amount of area. It's recently been established that you can easily have gigawatts of wind generation and the potential of the TTR proposal existing together. They can't exist on top of each other, no, but there's so much area out there that you can actually coexist with it as well, and that is actually being looked at as we speak. So with that, I know that I'm standing between everybody's lunch and this session here. I'm very pleased with the work that's been done in this area. It has been a long time coming. We've mentioned when this work began, and all of the entities that are looking at these offshore wind proposals have been waiting this for some time. We've got a number of parts still to go within the House here with the Committee of the Whole and the third reading, and I commend the bill to the House. Thank you.
Dr. Lawrence Zunan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
5-minute Te Pāti Māori call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I too rise on behalf of the Green Party to support the offshore renewable energy bill, and my colleagues, both Scott Willis and Francisco Hernandez, has spoke on why the Greens are supporting this bill. But I also want to kind of bring additional perspectives to this as well, Mr. Speaker, which is why I sought this particular call. Now, for the Greens, we understand the importance of offshore renewable energy, and I think as our energy spokesperson Scott Willis has said, that this is very much in terms, when we're looking at the future of energy generation, that is something that is also in line with our obligations under the Paris Agreement and what is supposed to be our emissions reduction plan. But in terms of the offshore renewable energy, I want to mention two sort of additional aspects of that. And while, again, the bill, there are lots of really good operational aspects, and particularly around specific requirements for consultation with Māori groups. There are additional things I want to mention on the broader context of offshore renewable energy. One of them is around the way that offshore renewable energy in Aotearoa are being investigated and also in terms of being invested. Noting that if you're looking at something in the South Taranaki in terms of some of the offshore renewable energy, and particularly when you're looking at wind energy, that some of the biggest supporters and backers of that is actually the New Zealand Super Fund. So when we are looking at the potential, not simply in terms of energy generation, but also the ability for us using our own sovereign funds to support domestic entrepreneurship, but also production, and also in terms of renewable energy, we will be able to see compounding effects that benefits Aotearoa on the whole. And I think that is something that really deserves mentioning when we're looking at the opportunities when it comes to offshore renewable energy. The other thing that I would like to address, Mr. Speaker, that again, while this bill in isolation is something that is good and it's moving towards a direction of renewable energy, it cannot go without saying that the combined effect of what the government is doing regarding other bills, including the repeal of oil and gas ban, and also the additional, subsidization of offshore oil and gas, is preventing or affecting our overall effort of having a renewable and sustainable energy source here in Aotearoa. And I think that needs to go, that needs to be said as well, because when we are looking at, to give an analogy, when we're looking at making a muffin, just because that most of the ingredients are fine, but even if it's just one component in there that is potentially poisonous, it means that the whole muffin is inedible. And that also kind of in some ways speak to the fact that while there are good initiatives that we're seeing being put through offshore renewable energy in terms of some of the projects around wind energy in the fast track legislation, but the overall intent of things like fast track and the overall intent of the government to repeal oil and gas ban is not moving us in the direction that fulfills our obligation under the Paris Agreement. So again, when we're looking at something like this, we cannot simply looking at something in isolation, but also need to look at the broader government agenda when it comes to energy. And the last thing that I want to touch on more broadly, and again, a lot of the things I'm saying will be things that we are really interested to tease out with the minister during the committee of the whole house stage coming up. And the last thing is energy production and renewable energy is a really important aspect, and this is, well articulated by a number of people in the House around this bill. But one of the things that this particular bill that should be part of a bigger package that also being looked at is the need for us, the recommendation of OECD to start breaking up some of the gentailers and how we can actually make energy that were being produced affordable for the overall population of Aotearoa. And at the same time, what initiatives are we also using on one hand, producing renewable energy sources, but on the other hand, also supporting people to make the right decision to reduce or to make energy consumption more efficient. So the Greens does support this bill, and we have a number of questions that we would like to discuss in the committee stage.
The question is the motion be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Aye. So contrary, no. The ayes have it.
Offshore renewable energy bill, second reading.
This bill is set down for committee stage next sitting day. The House stands adjourned until 3 p.m. today.